possession. We can think of these categories as doors for demonic attacks on the person. They invite demons in, but they do not always result in an actual demonic possession. There is also demonic oppression and demonic obsession. There's also just hanging on to the sin, right? And not removing yourself from the sin, which happens to be door number one, he tells us. So what are the three categories of activity that can open a person to demonic possession that most exorcists are in agreement upon? Patterns of sin that are not left, that are not departed from, patterns of sin, the occult, and being a victim of trauma. Now that last one kind of sounds harsh because the person's a victim after all, it's not their fault. Well, it's a question of healing though. Are they healed from that trauma?
That's Sermons for Everyday Living from 6 to 7 a.m. Eastern on the Station of the Cross.
The Catholic Current, bringing Christ to the world and the world to Christ.
I have no clue what my future looks like. I know who my future is, and it lies in the hands of Christ. I'm not worried about where I'm going to live, what I'm going to do. My life, I want it to be His, and there's such a freedom in that. I never, ever thought that I would find freedom in a laid-down, surrendered life to Christ.
The Catholic Current, 5 p.m. Eastern, from the Station of the Cross and on the iCatholic Radio mobile app.
The Station of the Cross Catholic Media Network presents Saints and Seasons. On January 9th, we celebrate the feast of St. Adrian of Canterbury, abbot and confessor. Adrian was a North African, born in the mid-7th century. He was serving as an abbot near Naples in Italy, when Pope St. Vitalian tried to appoint him to succeed the late St. Deusdedit as Archbishop of Canterbury in England. Adrian, a humble man, refused the appointment and suggested his friend St. Theodore of Tarsus. Vitalian accepted the suggestion, but insisted that Adrian accompany the new archbishop as an advisor and traveling companion, to which the holy abbot readily assented. Adrian was stopped and held captive in France by a high official who suspected him of being a spy for the Eastern Roman Emperor, but eventually he was released, and he finally rejoined Archbishop Theodore in Canterbury. Theodore appointed Adrian abbot of the local monastery of Saints Peter and Paul, later known as St. Augustine's. There, the holy abbot taught multiple subjects, helping form numerous saints in both knowledge and holiness, until his death almost 40 years later in the year of our Lord 709 or 710. Many miracles occurred at his tomb. The abbey was sadly lost during the infamous dissolution of the monasteries by King Henry VIII. Also celebrated on this day are Saint Marciana, Saint Peter of Sebasta, the brother of Saint Basil the Great, Saint Marcellinus, and many other martyrs, confessors, and holy virgins. For more about the saints and seasons of the Catholic Church, visit thestationofthecross.com/saints and seasons.
We just don't know the day or the hour. I think this should be a sober wake-up call for all of us. What do you say?
It's so easy for these things to slip away and we get back to old bad habits. But we're in a life and death struggle. I know I get accused of, he's just into conspiracy theories. The conspiracies are real. Sorting through what is just a crazy theory and what is reality, that's tough.
That's A Catholic Take. Weekdays at 7 a.m. Eastern on the Station of the Cross.
The Station of the Cross began broadcasting in Buffalo, New York in 1999. Since then, our listening areas have multiplied and expanded into several states. While our mission is to grow the Catholic faith through radio and other media outlets, our apostolate is supportive of but independent from your local diocese. Through your generosity, we are able to inspire countless listeners with the gospel and help lead them to a parish to be spiritually nourished by the sacraments.
This is Joe McLean, and you're listening to the Station of the Cross, proclaiming the fullness of the truth with clarity and charity.
Heard around the world on your Android and Apple mobile devices.
Go into the world and tell every man that you meet, there is a man on the cross.
A Catholic Take. What you need to know right now. A bold synthesis of inspiration and information. Keeping you up to date on the news and issues from a courageous Catholic perspective.
A Catholic Take with Joe McLean starts now.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean. So good to be on with you. Praise be to God. The biggest peacetime crime and cover-up in British history. Is that actually the case? Let's have a listen to Nigel Farage from Parliament yesterday.
To what extent were gangs of Pakistani men raping young white girls? Because ultimately, it seems to me there's a deep racist element behind what happened. Now, I might be right, I might be wrong, but doesn't the country deserve a full, open national inquiry?
You'd think so, but the vote didn't come out so well.
The ayes to the right were 111, the noes to the left 364. So the noes have it, the noes have it.
So there won't be a national inquiry, and maybe Nigel will help to, solve that in another way. But the real question is, what is going on there with these grooming gangs? How many victims were there? Why does this happen? Why does it seem like there has been a consistent cover-up of that? Have there been? Is an inquiry really the best thing for these victims? What can be done? What should be done? I want to know because I don't know, and I've invited Reverend Dr. Alexander Lucie-Smith on the team at 30 past the hour to have a conversation about these Pakistani grooming gangs in the UK over these years and what is really going on there. So that's coming up on the show today. I also want to cover the fires out in LA. There's been a lot of Maui-like problems going on with these fires in LA. I mean, not only has it just been destruction, lives are lost now, 5 lives, I think, so far. But where's the water? And why has funding been cut to the fire department? Very recently, in fact. And there's reports of insurance companies canceling coverage just prior to all of this. So we're going to get to that as well with Brent Haynes at 15 or 14 past the hour. So we're going to be covering that as well. We'll put links to everything we discussed today for you in the show notes over at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. By the way, last night, great Bible study. Loved hanging out with the insiders. Praise be to God. So it was the first Bible study of the year. Really enjoyed that. And we're going to be giving away a Bible thanks to our good friends over at tanbooks.com. A leather-bound Douay-Rheims. That's going to be going to a winner this week. Praise be to Jesus. All right, we're going to jump into it. Do us a favor and share us with a friend. But let's pray. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thine intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, I fly unto thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my mother. To thee do I come. Before thee I stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And now your saint of the day.
Saint Adrian of Canterbury, pray for us. Adrian was a North African, born in the mid-7th century. He was serving as an abbot near Naples in Italy when Pope Saint Vitalian tried to appoint him to succeed the late Saint Deusdedit as Archbishop of Canterbury in England. Adrian, a humble man, refused the appointment and suggested his friend Saint Theodore of Tarsus. Vitalian accepted the suggestion, but insisted that Adrian accompany the new archbishop as an advisor and traveling companion, to which the holy abbot readily assented. Adrian was stopped and held captive in France by a high official who suspected him of being a spy for the Eastern Roman Emperor, but eventually he was released and he finally rejoined Archbishop Theodore in Canterbury. Theodore appointed Adrian abbot of the local monastery of Saints Peter and Paul, later known as St. Augustine's or St. Austin's. There, the holy abbot taught multiple subjects, helping form numerous saints in both knowledge and holiness, until his death almost 40 years later, in the year of our Lord 709 or 710. Many miracles occurred at his tomb. The abbey was sadly lost during the infamous dissolution of the monasteries by King Henry VIII. For more about this day and others in the Church's calendar, visit thestationofthecross.com/saints-and-seasons. Saint Adrian of Canterbury, pray for us.
And now your headline news. The Blaze reports Trump presses SCOTUS for 11th hour intervention in New York hush money case. Attorneys for President-elect Donald Trump filed an emergency application with the U.S. Supreme Court in hopes of blocking the sentencing by Judge Juan Merchant in the case of New York v. Trump. The emergency application requested that the justices order a stay of the criminal proceedings in the Supreme Court of New York pending the final resolution of the Republicans' appeal concerning questions of presidential immunity. The Supreme Court directed prosecutors to respond to the emergency application by this morning, a possible sign that the High Court may take action prior to Merchant's planned sentencing tomorrow. So I guess we'll see. Breitbart reports German anti-mass migration party surges in the poll ahead of an election. The populist Alternative for Germany, AfD party, has begun to surge while Germans prepare to go to the polls, and the establishment party continues to backslide, apparently. The anti-mass migration party has risen by 2 points to 21% support, putting the party firmly in second place. The neo-liberal Christian Democratic Union Party, formerly led by Angela Merkel, remains ahead, though, at 29%. AfD's surge in the polls comes after yet another terror attack at a Christmas market in Magdeburg just last month. And the New York Post is reporting L.A. Mayor Karen Bass cut fire department funding by $17.6 million just months before wildfires turned city into hellscape. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass faced scorching criticism Wednesday as it was revealed that she cut the city's fire department budget by $17.6 million ahead of this week's devastating fires, as she prioritized funds for its massive homeless population that largely went unspent, according to a report. The cut was the second largest in Bass's 24-25 fiscal budget. It wasn't even the gutting that she actually wanted, though. A city comptroller study found that nearly half of the funding went unspent, according to the outlet. And those are your headline news. The gospel today comes to us from Luke chapter 4, verses 14 through 22. And Jesus returned in the power of the Spirit into Galilee, and the fame of him went out through the whole country. And he taught in their synagogues and was magnified by all. And he came to Nazareth, where he was brought up. And he went into the synagogue according to the custom on the Sabbath day. And he rose up to read. And the book of Isaiah the prophet was delivered unto him. And as he unfolded the book, he found the place where it was written, The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. Wherefore he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He hath sent me to heal the contrite of heart, to preach deliverance to the captives, and sight to the blind, and to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord, and the day of reward. And when he had folded the book and restored it to the minister, and sat down, and then the eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed upon him, and he began to say to them, This day is fulfilled this scripture in your ears. And all gave testimony to him, and they wondered at the words of grace that proceeded from his mouth. And they said, Is not this the son of Joseph? The gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. The Ignatius Catholic Study Bible would say, since many during New Testament times expected the Messiah to liberate Israel from political domination of the Romans, the townspeople mistakenly thought these passages promised their national independence. Isaiah's oracle picks up the language of Leviticus 25 regarding the Jubilee year, though. As part of Israel's economic legislation, a Jubilee was celebrated every 50 years. It signaled the remission of debts, the release of slaves, and the return of ancestral property to its original family owners. Isaiah projects this Jubilee celebration into the future when God will come to release Israel from its slavery, its idols, and debt, its guilt. Jesus follows the spirit of Isaiah when he announces liberation from sin, not from political or economic subjugation. Elsewhere in Luke, these words, a release, means forgiveness. So it's forgiveness of sins. Haydock's commentary, Father Haydock, writing back in the 19th century, said some are of the opinion that the Jews of Nazareth, having heard of the miracles and fame of Jesus, that he was accustomed to teach in their synagogues, though he had never been instructed in any learning, when he rose to speak, gave him the book of Isaiah on purpose, which was esteemed as the most difficult to be explained, in order that they might test him to try his learning, though it is probable that it was done by the all-directing interposition of divine providence. By the poor are to be understood the Gentiles, who might truly be called poor, says Father Haydock. He goes on, since they possessed neither the knowledge of the true God, nor of the law, nor of the prophets. Isaiah in this place speaks of himself as a figure of the Messiah. The captivity of Babylon, which is the literal object of this prophecy, was a figure of the then state of mankind. The return from this captivity, announced by the prophet and effected by Cyrus, represented the redemption of man effected by Jesus Christ. Our Lord is a new Moses, and he's come to give us a new Exodus, to free us from the bondage and slavery of sin, to free us from that which we hold on to so tightly in this world. And even though the Nazarenes took Jesus after this to the brow of a hill to throw him over, to kill him, because they just couldn't accept what he had to reveal to them, Jesus saved himself, because it wouldn't be until the passion, death, and resurrection in Jerusalem that he would save us and free us in our new Exodus. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Fear of God is one of the 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit. It instills awe and reverence for God's power and love. In the new year, how can you grow in holy awe and draw others closer to the heart of God? Your iCatholic mobile phone service supports the Station of the Cross, calling hearts to greater reverence through Catholic programming and faithful witness. More info at iCatholicMobile.com. iCatholic Mobile underwrites with the Station of the Cross.
Download the app to take our programming with you wherever you go. Hear what listeners are saying about the regularly updated iCatholic Radio app.
The programs on iCatholic Radio are uplifting, educational, and have served to deepen my faith as a Catholic. Thank you for this amazing station.
Download the free iCatholic Radio app in your Android or Apple store today. If you already have the app, please consider giving us a 5-star review or telling a friend about it.
Please join us in a prayer to our guardian angel. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. O holy guardian angel, take care of our soul and body. Enlighten our mind that we may know the Lord better and love him with all our heart. Help us in our prayers so that we may not give in to distractions. Assist us with your advice so that we may see the good and carry it out with generosity. Defend us from the insidious snares of the enemy and sustain us in temptations that we may always be victorious. Remedy our coldness in our worship of the Lord. Cease not to protect us until you have brought us into paradise, where we will praise our good God together for all eternity. Amen.
Be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain. So good to be on with you. Praise be to God. Hey, coming up at 30 past the hour, I want to jump into the story coming out of the UK. Elon Musk has ripped the cloak of deceit off one of Britain's most distinguished scandals, says one headline at the Telegraph. Here's another, the biggest peacetime crime and cover-up in British history. The grooming story out of the UK is horrible. If you read the details, I can't imagine the horror that the victims have been going through all of these years. So why then is there seemingly no real effort to get to the bottom of it, to hold the people accountable, to say what needs to be said, to call a spade a spade? I don't understand the details, but we've invited Reverend Dr. Alexander Lucie-Smith to be on the team at 30 past the hour to help us better understand. All of that coming up in just a little bit. But right now, the fires raging in California are also becoming a big scandal. It would seem that there's a lot of shenanigans, and a lot of people are having memories, flashbacks, bad ones, of the Maui fire. We've invited our good friend Brent Haynes, Catholic attorney and freedom fighter, to be on the team to help us better understand. Brent, good morning to you. Thank you for your time.
Good morning, Joe. Good morning, everyone.
So the mayor in Los Angeles, she gets a scorching yesterday because she cut the budget, apparently, not just a couple of months ago, of the fire department by $17+ million. That seems like a bad decision, especially given that they seem to know that the Santa Ana winds come every year. It's not like this was a surprise. What's going on?
Joe, this is a sad situation. And of course, we all need to be praying for the people in California and all the other people out there who are suffering from situations like this. The point of talking about this morning, though, is not, it's not to dwell on some unnecessary, some catastrophe. The point is that this is worse than it should have been.
Yeah.
It's worse than it should have been because of not just government mismanagement, which is inherent in bureaucracy no matter what you do. Some bureaucracies operate better than others. Again, that's why you want good government leaders. Not just because of corruption. There's always some corruption to a certain extent. But this was compounded on top of government inefficiency, on top of corruption. You have that progressive, woke California ideology. And that has made this worse. And that is a shame because that means people have suffered more than they needed to suffer in this situation. These winds happen every year. Forest fires are part of living in California, just like mudslides are part of living in California. And it's worse than it had to be because of their progressive woke policies, all the way from the city and county level, all the way up to the state level, and even with the feds. Here's a headline for you, Joe. How many years of corruption and how years of corruption and management led to L.A. running out of water in the middle of the Palisades wildfire.
Yeah.
And it's just a story. One of their local government units, they had to replace one of the officials because of alleged mismanagement. It goes on and on. Their fire hydrants are out of water. Why are the fire hydrants out of water? California has had record rains. Just in the last 2 years or so, California has had record rains. Why didn't they catch that water? Why didn't they catch that runoff? Why didn't they store it? And for people who don't live in the area or don't follow this kind of news, the water supply in California is a major, major problem. They have to have an extensive water system out there because Southern California is naturally dry. That's why Mulholland Drive out there is named Mulholland, because that man got the water system going for Southern California. And Gavin Newsom, in recent years, has torn down 4 dams. Now, he tore them down to help restore natural waterways and fish movement for Native Americans, and that's perfectly fine. But why didn't he put in a replacement? Why didn't he build another reservoir? Years ago, Californians voted to spend money on a reservoir or more reservoirs, and Gavin Newsom hasn't built any. He tears down 4 dams that had water available for firefighters, and then Gavin Newsom doesn't do anything to replace them. And so approximately a day into the Pacific Palisades fire, they ran out of water. Imagine the firefighters are at your house getting ready to save it, and all of a sudden the hydrants run dry.
Amazing. That's insane.
And
California's been having water problems for a while now, though, haven't they?
Well, and what's another reason, Joe? Well, of course, the Endangered Species Act. There's a tiny fish called the Delta smelt. It's an endangered species, and it lives, by some reports, exclusively in the heart of the state's water distribution system. That affects water going to 35 million Californians. And Gavin Newsom and the progressive environmentalists would rather go out of their way to protect this tiny fish than make some sort of reasonable accommodation to provide water for the citizens of Southern California and to make it available for emergencies like this.
Hey, do you remember the actor? Do you remember the actor James Woods?
Yes, I saw it, and I saw him on TV. Yeah, I saw him on TV.
He lost his house in this fire, but he also reported yesterday. He said, and I'm going to quote right off of his Twitter feed. He says, actually, because one of the claims is the insurance companies were canceling coverage. This is actually one of the major insurance companies canceled all the policies in our neighborhood about 4 months ago. The thought of that strikes me because all the people who are losing their houses, I know they might be very wealthy or what have you, but Americans, no matter what level of income they happen to live at, they tend to live beyond their means. They live in debt, Americans do. So big house, small house, we're all in debt. Cars debt, house debt, credit card debt, loans debt, debt. All of these people, think about how much bankruptcy is going to be the order of the day for most of these people. That seems rather insane to me. If they're not going to be able to be covered by their insurance, don't you think so?
Well, and look, I'm no friend of insurance companies. I've dealt with them in an adversarial situation as an attorney many times over the years. They can be extremely difficult to deal with. Hardly anybody, after they get to be a certain age in life, doesn't have a story about dealing with insurance companies. But in this situation, can you blame them? In California, they don't do the prescribed bans, or they don't do the burns to control the fires the way they're supposed to. They're not making water available so that it's available for the fire departments. They're engaging in diversity, DEI training and recruitment instead of focusing on getting the proper firefighters in there. And the insurance companies come along and they look at this risk and they say, we can't afford this. And let's face it, the insurance companies go in and then bail people out, and then they go bankrupt, and we're bailing out the insurance companies also. Before the fire started, I saw a news story just a few days ago about the insurance companies cutting someone's homeowner's insurance. And they did an overhead shot taken from a drone, obviously, of a house in California sitting in the forest, essentially. I mean, it was surrounded by forest. Look, homeowners need to realize if you have a house in an area prone to forest fires and you live in a forest, your house is at risk. And when you go to get insurance, the insurance company is going to calculate that risk. And regulators in California are trying to be pro-environmentalists. They're trying to keep everybody happy on the environmental side. They're trying to keep prices down and refuse price increases for insurance companies. They don't want to make accommodations for insurance companies. And then they engage in, or refuse to engage in, to be more precise, reasonable fire control management policies. So you can't really blame the insurance companies on this one, because California set themselves up to fail on this.
I don't even know what to say. I'm even looking at a video that James posted on his X feed. It's just mind-boggling. And I know every year there's videos just like this, because forest fires and out of control fires are part of life in many parts of not just our country, but other parts of the world as well. But just to think that the people in Maui, when that happened, I covered that story with Jason Jones. A lot of those folks, they were having to live 2 or 3 families or like 2 or 3 generations in a family in the same house because they couldn't afford to pay the mortgage otherwise, because you're talking about $1 million to have a shack in a place like Maui. Malibu can't be far off from that in cost. And again, this is the devastation of this. I don't know. I honestly don't know how people recover from that. Maybe they walk away. Maybe they move to Oklahoma where it's more affordable. I don't know. But will anybody be held accountable for all of these things that you just mentioned? It doesn't seem like there's ever going to be any accountability. Nothing ever changes, it seems, Brent.
Well, it certainly doesn't change in California very often, does it? San Francisco threw out their ultra-progressive district attorney just a few years ago because crime was getting so far out of control. They tried to recall the district attorney, George Gascon, in Los Angeles, and that failed. But in the election last year, he was absolutely trounced because, the voters had too much on crime. When things get really bad and your average person starts to notice and starts to get angry and starts to think about it, then, sometimes there's accountability. But the far left interests in California are well entrenched. They control the levers of power. And as one commentator said, as long as the unions out there, such as the SEIU, are in control, there's not going to be any change. Here's a headline for you, Joe. Forest Service halts prescribed burns in California. Is it worth the risk? The date of the headline, October 24th, 2024. And that's from a PBS station. That's from KQED. So that's your National Public Radio affiliate in California, one of them. Hardly, a conservative, anti-progressive entity. And that's their headline. Forest Service halts prescribed burns in California. Is it worth the risk? There are organizations in California, local organizations, that exist exclusively for the purpose of doing these preventative burns. And for people who aren't real familiar with it, the idea is you go in and you do what's called a controlled burn, and it gets rid of the undergrowth so that when a forest fire comes along, it won't have so much fuel that it just grows out of control. And look, prescribed burns have to be done very carefully. They have to be done at the right time of the year. There are only 2 seasons in California when you can do it. If you miss your window of opportunity, you miss it because you can only do it under very controlled circumstances. And sometimes the prescribed burns themselves get out of control. But the local burn associations in California were doing their burns. The state was doing some burns, though I've seen reports that they weren't doing enough. And then the federal government came in last fall and missed the window and said, we're not going to do it.
That's amazing.
So, is it worth the risk? No, apparently not. Apparently not. The LA mayor cut the budget for the fire department. The budget for the fire department was approximately $800 and some million. She only cut it by almost $18 million, but still, the LA fire chief came out and warned about problems with that. But guess how much they spent on the homeless in Los Angeles, Joe?
Yeah, I know.
800 and some million for the fire department. 1.35 billion for the homeless.
Wow.
1.35 billion for the homeless. Now, it turns out the controller said they only spent about half that, which is probably good for the taxpayers out there. But why wasn't the money properly allocated to begin with?
I don't know, but now that all these homes have been burnt, they have all that land. They could rebuild a homeless shelter right there on the beach in Malibu. I mean, who knows? The opportunities are limitless.
Here's one last headline for you, Joe. One last headline. Firefighting is mostly white and male. A California program aims to change that.
Oh, man. How about we get the best person to do the job? How about we just focus on the right tool for the right job and forget about all these DEI shenanigans? Hey, Brent Haynes, thanks for your coverage of this. I appreciate it. We'll put links in the show notes for everything we discussed. Coming up after the break, we're going to have a conversation about the biggest peacetime crime and cover-up in British history, Pakistani grooming and molesting of British girls. That's coming up. Don't go anywhere.
Are you looking for a simple, creative, and easy way to contribute to the Station of the Cross? Why not consider a transfer of stock or donating a mutual fund gift to help support us in our work of evangelization? Transferring a gift of long-term appreciated stocks, those owned for more than 1 year, can provide significant tax advantages by allowing you to deduct the fair market value while paying no capital gain tax. Today, most stock transfers are easily made electronically from your broker. Just call us at 1-877-888-6279. That's 1-877-888-6279. Your broker will need to indicate the number of shares being transferred and the CUSIP number of the shares. May God bless you for considering a gift to the Station of the Cross so that we can continue proclaiming the fullness of truth with clarity and charity for years to come.
Can we be happy without God? Atheists say yes, we Christians say yes, but only to a certain extent. What's our reason? There are some natural human desires that can be satisfied without living for God. The desire for sensory pleasure, success, and loving relationships. There are certain desires, however, that can't be satisfied without God. For example, we don't just desire some love, we desire infinite love, love without limit. This is manifest when we get frustrated with imperfect manifestations of it. The same is true for knowledge, justice, and beauty. Since God alone is infinite in these perfections, only He can satisfy our desires for them. Therefore, to borrow from St. Augustine, without God, our hearts would be forever restless. And my friends, a restless heart is an unhappy heart. I'm Carlo Broussard with a ready reason for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean, and here are your headline news. The Hill reports 5 dead, multiple significant injuries in LA wildfires. 5 people are dead, and several other individuals have suffered from significant injuries due to the Eaton fire spreading across Los Angeles County, according to authorities. The wildfire has been able to spread with Santa Ana winds, prompting evacuations and causing power outages. LA County Fire Chief Anthony Maroney added that the Eaton fire has burned over 2,200 acres with no containment, and over 100 structures have been destroyed. An investigation is underway, and this is just one of many fires in the area. CNA reports China's oldest priest dies at 104. Father Joseph Gaufeud, SVD, has died 2 months from what would have been his 105th birthday. He was one of the few remaining Catholic priests in China who had been ordained prior to the establishment of the People's Republic of China. Benedict Rogers, human rights activist, noted that although the priest had spent a quarter of a century in prison, he continued serving and ministering to his people through his 90s. Quote, he treated prison not as the harsh injustice that it was, but as an opportunity to grow in faith, spirituality, and prayer. Close quote. Wow spent a total of 25 years in prison during his lifetime. May God rest his soul. The BBC reports earthquake in Tibet claims 126 lives, causes widespread destruction. More than 14,000 rescue workers have arrived in Tibet to continue the search for survivors after a strong earthquake killed at least 126 people in a remote part of western China. The U.S. Geological Survey reported the earthquake had a magnitude of 7.1 and occurred at a depth of about 10 kilometers. More than 400 people have been rescued so far, according to Chinese state media, since the quake struck on Tuesday, some 50 miles from the base of Mount Everest, destroying thousands of homes. Let's keep them in our prayers. And those are your headline news. Hey, over the last couple of days, there's been a lot of outrage in the news of what's going on in the UK. Elon Musk has been stirring up lots of trouble over this. There's a headline over at the Telegraph. Elon Musk has ripped the cloak of deceit off of one of Britain's most disgusting scandals. But Nigel Farage gave a great statement, I think, in Parliament yesterday. Have a listen.
To what extent were gangs of Pakistani men raping young white girls? Because ultimately, it seems to me there's a deep racist element behind what happened. Now, I might be right, I might be wrong. But doesn't the country deserve a full, open national inquiry? And I'll say this, if the government won't do this, and I do believe there is now overwhelming support on all sides of the political spectrum for this, and Parliament should not be in denial about this, if it doesn't, then we will raise the money at Reform UK and appoint independent arbiters, because we need the truth to be out there.
Well, the effort in Parliament yesterday was, in fact, turned down. It was voted against 364 to 111. And that seems, as an outsider, that seems absolutely crazy to me. So I've asked Reverend Dr. Alexander Lucie-Smith to be on with us today to help us better understand what is going on here. And he joins us now. Good morning to you, Father. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me. Well, where should we begin with this grooming scandal, rape scandal that's been roiling Great Britain for actually 30 years. It's not a new thing. It's been going on since the turn of the century. On the one hand, it's a very simple thing. And on the other hand, it becomes impossibly complicated. So if I could just go to the very simple thing right at the beginning, it's beyond doubt that in numerous British towns, including Oxford, which is a very prosperous town, but also including Rochdale and Rotherham, which are probably two of the poorest towns in Britain, gangs of Muslim men were systematically exploiting, grooming, raping young girls. These girls were very young. They were 13, 14, 15. And these girls obviously complained about their treatment to the various authorities. And the various authorities, by and large, fobbed them off. Either they said the girls were not credible witnesses, or else they said the girls were teenage prostitutes and they were doing this of their own free will.
Oh, my.
They based this on the very loose argument that the girls were receiving favors from their tormentors, such as free taxi rides and free kebabs and food and so on. Therefore, they were prostitutes. Also, they said, and this is the most shocking thing, they said, oh no, we can't investigate this because it will endanger racial harmony. We'll be seen as racist because the people who've been accused are almost exclusively Pakistani Muslims. Now, then what happened was that this scandal gradually blew up, and it happened in various towns, and a lot of people came forward who were what we call in England whistleblowers. Now, some of these were social workers and health workers to whom the girls went, because many of these girls had horrific physical injuries. So there was a lady called Sarah Rowbottom, and there was another lady called Jane Senior, who were social workers and health workers, who blew the whistle on this. Then it went a level higher, and several MPs took it up. One who's now retired was a lady called Anne Cryer. Another was a lady called Sarah Champion. She was the MP for one of these towns. Also, a lady called Lucy Allen. These were three female MPs who represented these girls, after all, or represented their parents. Now, Anne Cryer was a Labour MP, not a right-wing nutcase by any stretch of the imagination. She was told to shut up. She was told she was racist. Sarah Champion was told to shut up, and she was told she was racist, and she was sacked from her front bench position in the Labour opposition. Lucy Allen was told to shut up, that she was being racist, and that it would not help her career. She's subsequently no longer in Parliament because she was voted out. Now, one of the key developments in this scandal is that in 2017, a television program came out made by the BBC, which was called Three Girls, which was about the scandal, I think, in Rochdale or Rotherham. And it starred a very famous actress playing the part of Sarah Rowbottom, the heroic social worker, medical worker who brought all this to public attention. But it had already come to public attention by that stage. Because I remember about 20 years ago, maybe, seeing a play in the theatre about Anne Cryer. Now, it's come to public attention again and again and again, but at the same time, there's been very, very strong pushback from people saying, no, you can't talk about this. This is demonizing members of the Islamic and Pakistani community. And of course, don't you realize that most child sexual abuse takes place by white men, are the most guilty people of child sexual abuse. Now, so we've got something very simple here, child sexual abuse on a massive scale by Pakistani Muslim men, and going on for decades, and probably lots of cases where we don't know it's still going on because these criminals are not going to advertise their activities, probably going on in many other places. Then we've got the pushback. You're racist. We can't do this because multiculturalism will be endangered. Or else we've got another pushback saying, what about all the white men who are committing child sexual abuse? And we've got another pushback saying, these girls are making it up. We've still got people saying, these girls are making it up. So it's now what's changed recently is Elon Musk has taken it up. But it's actually something that has been going on since about 1998. The other thing is this, and this is where it gets much more complicated, is people were arrested, people were put on trial, and they were sentenced. These men from Rochdale and Telford and other places, they got rather light sentences, it has to be said, 4 years, things like that. They also got, many of them had dual nationality, and they should have been deported. But no, they were given legal aid by the state to fight deportation, and they had very lengthy cases, and I think most of them have not been deported. They're still here. One of the things that's really awful is that there are young women now who were raped, gang raped as girls, and who occasionally do something perfectly innocent, like go to the supermarket, and they see at the end of a supermarket aisle their tormentor, who is still living in the same town, who is now free. He might have gone down for 5 years into prison, or he might have done 2.5 years in prison, because you get half off for good behavior, and he's walking around. And these girls are horrified and tormented all over again by that experience. What's happened is we have forgotten the victims in this. The victims are the most important people. And the other thing is, then we've got this thing about the public inquiry. Now, this is what Elon Musk picked up. The government minister in charge of this sort of thing, she said in Oldham, where there'd been a rape gang scandal, oh no, we must have a local inquiry, not a national inquiry. Now, it's been pointed out that the Labour Party never found an inquiry it didn't love, but suddenly they've changed their tune. They don't want an inquiry. Now, the reason for this is, of course, because the Labour Party is facing a very strong challenge electorally from Islamist MPs. 4 Islamist MPs were elected on the Gaza ticket. They literally said, this is for Gaza. And several leading members of the Labour Party, including the lady who refused to have the public inquiry, Jess Phillips, just made it back into Parliament despite a very strong challenge from Muslim candidates. So the Labour Party is terrified of stirring up anti-Muslim, a bad feeling amongst the Muslims. Now, the Muslim MPs, not one of them has spoken about this in Parliament, which I find quite extraordinary. Now, and the other thing is, nobody wants to talk about the cultural and religious aspects of this. The cultural and the religious aspects are very clear. First of all, in Britain, we have an age of consent. It's 16. If somebody has sexual intercourse or anything with a girl under the age of 16, that is statutory rape and it is a crime. And if you're caught, you go to jail. That at least is how most of us think it should be. That's how most of us think it is. Turns out not so much, not as much as we thought. Now, the terrible thing was that the police in places like Rotherham and Rochdale were saying, oh, these girls, they're prostitutes. They're 13 years old. They're having sex with men. That's normal. They can't complain. So we've compromised on the age of consent thing. No, if you're having sex before the age of 16, that is wrong and it has to stop. End of. But of course, there have been quite a few chippings away at that already. The other thing is, in the culture of the perpetrators, does the age of consent exist? And in their minds, does the age of consent exist? Does the age of consent exist in Sharia law? And as far as I can tell, no, it doesn't seem to. The other thing is the perpetrators referred to the girls as, forgive me for saying this, I'm not sure if it's very rude in America, white slags and infidel whores. And there was another phrase they used, which I can't repeat on radio. And of course, the people who were supposed to be protecting these girls, they didn't use those terms, but they essentially had the same low opinion of these girls. They were white, they were working class, maybe they were poorly educated and poorly presented, and they didn't see them as somehow or another worth protecting. Now we go on to a much bigger picture, and that's this. Who are the most downtrodden people in Britain? The most downtrodden people in Britain are not our Asian brothers and sisters or our black brothers and sisters. The people who do worst in school are, of course, white boys. White girls do a bit better. So the most downtrodden people in Britain are the white working class, the ones who've fallen behind. And that, of course, is something nobody wants to talk about.
Hold that thought right there. Wow. There's so many questions in my mind. Reverend Dr. Alexander Lucie-Smith is our guest. He's a priest in the UK talking about this grooming story. And I got to tell you, I'm going to link to a lot of articles today so that you can have a better sense of what's going on. Several, the Free Press, the BBC, the Telegraph. I've got several, even the European Conservative. I'm going to put links in the show notes for you at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. They include some details of some of the stories of this, like there's a 12-year-old girl. I won't read it to you. It's so detailed, it's disgusting. I wonder, where are the dads in all of this? I got to tell you, if my little girl was raped, I don't think I'd be standing around being quiet. And then, of course, where's the church in England on this? I want to know. We're going to ask those questions coming up next. Don't go anywhere.
When you talk to people who were locked in sin, and you can't convince them to leave their sin, it's because they don't have any fear of hell. They fear God, they don't want to offend him, but nobody talks about the fact that hell's real or that it endures forever. So you stand before the truth of God and you're illuminated completely in his truth. All you see is all the filthiness, the wretchedness, how vile you are, and how you hate him. You hate the one that you stand in front of. So what if he tries to give you a hug? You hate him. You won't accept it. What if he says, please come in? I hate you. I would never come in there. This is how horrible it is. This is what has to be meditated on. To die in a state of sin means that you hate God. Whether you feel like you hate God or you don't, it doesn't matter. Not having the grace of God means you hate him.
That's Sermons for Everyday Living from 6 to 7 a.m. Eastern on the Station of the Cross.
Catholic radio has just been a lifesaver for me. I still listen to it every day. I start my day with it. I listen to it all day long as much as I can. I am very grateful for it.
It's just an amazing thing to have, as I am new to Catholicism. Obviously, it's not only helping me, but it's helping so many other people on their walk.
Thank you. God bless you for iCatholic Radio. It has changed my life.
Donate today at thestationofthecross.com.
This is Jesuit Father Robert McTague, your daily host of the Catholic Current. Join me on Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern to welcome back Father Casey Jones. He's a pastor. What does he have to say about reverence? Find out on the Catholic Current on Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern, coming to you from the Station of the Cross and the iCatholic Radio mobile app.
To Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean. So good to be on with you. Praise be to God. The biggest peacetime crime and cover-up in British history. We're talking about the grooming story out of the UK. Elon Musk getting involved now. Apparently, he read some court documents about the description of the atrocities committed by some of these Pakistani, rapist gangs against these young women in the UK, and it disgusted him. So he started making it public, stirring up even more controversy and trouble. So we've been talking about this with the Reverend Dr. Alexander Lucie-Smith, the Catholic priest out of the UK, and I'm going to put links to these stories in the show notes for you today over at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. Father, welcome back. Thank you again for your time today. We'll continue in the after show coming up at the top of the hour on live video on our live streams as well. But one of the stories, the one out of the BBC, it was a former investigator, and he's saying this is definitely still happening in the UK. There are definitely still Pakistani rape gangs going on, and there are victims today. But he also quotes, or the article quotes out of the BBC, one of the victims from times past, and she says she doesn't want a national inquiry. She says that's a waste of time. What we want is action, not just thinking about it, talking about it, looking into it. We want something to be done by this. Do you think that's fair?
Yes, I do. I do actually take the view that a national inquiry would be a waste of time and it would cost a huge amount of money. And the other thing is it would go on a very long time and be an excuse for inaction. And also there are too many people who want to defend their reputations and say it would really be about their reputations and not about the victims. The other thing is this, though, the real and yet another problem associated with this is we have governments who can't govern. We have people who say we need to do something about this, but who can't deliver. Why can't we take action? Why are all our governments so extraordinarily paralyzed when it comes to actually governing the country? Because we've got enough laws, for goodness sake.
Yeah, to be sure. Now, before the break, you started to mention sort of the demographics, the worst performers in school are white males, that kind of thing. It made me wonder, like, where are the dads in this story? These little girls being raped and molested, are they fatherless homes?
Not necessarily. Some of these girls who were raped were actually in care. Now, that's an English phrase. I don't know if you know what it means. It means when the local government comes and takes the child off the parents because the child's at risk. of abuse or very disadvantaged, not being properly looked after, and therefore the person is put with adoptive parents. So some of these children were from very problematic families, but that doesn't mean to say, of course, they should be denied justice.
Right, of course.
Them were actually from standard families, and of course the parents got very angry, and in one case the father was actually arrested for protesting about his daughter's rape.
I have to imagine I'd probably be in that category if I'm being honest. This would be a 2-for-1 special for the devil, I imagine. You know, destroying society, destroying souls. He corrupts families, he corrupts the homes, and then he, for further, he like sort of fans that flame where we're seeing these Pakistani gangs raping and molesting these vulnerable children. It just seems disgusting to me, to say the least. Where has the church stood on this issue over the years in the UK?
I haven't heard any commentary from the church.
Wow.
I don't think in the places where this took place, I haven't come across a single priest whose commentary has been picked up by the national press, who had feet on the ground and who was in the middle of it and so on. That's not to say that the priests at a local level were not doing what they should be doing. It's quite possible that nobody was interested in what they had to say, so it did not get reported. Don't forget, people like Anne Cryer, who was a very respected MP. I mean, she was told to shut up. And so if you can tell Anne Cryer to shut up, you can tell people further down the food chain to shut up as well. And I think that's what must have happened. Don't rock the boat. You don't want to create race riots, for example, would have been one of the things they would have said. You don't want to demonize the Islamic and Pakistani communities.
What was that our Lord said about harming one of the least one of mine? Yeah. It comes to mind right now, and it just seems like, have we forgotten that we're all going to die someday and have to stand before the Lord in judgment? And golly gee whiz, if we knew and didn't say anything, I mean, think about even just the scandal within Holy Mother Church over the past several decades, going back to 2002 with former Cardinal Theodore McCarrick leading the USCCB here in the United States, giving us the plan to fix all this when he was the biggest perpetrator all along. I mean, in Boston, and now it's just it's like a wildfire. It spread so far and so fast. And how many people, we were told, knew about McCarrick's scandal and said and did nothing? I mean, shame on us. And here we are seeing this now in secular society too. We're going to have to give an account, Father, for this. So we need to speak up. We need to do something about this. The bishops in England should take a strong stand, not because they want to create race riots, but because error shouldn't have its day in court. Don't you agree?
I agree completely. I mean, I think number one thing that the church needs to point out to everybody, and particularly to ourselves, is that our number one duty is fidelity to the truth. If something's happening, we say, this is what it is. This is happening. We don't try and massage it or spin it in some way. And the most ridiculous thing, of course, is to say, oh, well, most child sexual abuse is carried out by white men. Yes, that's because there are more white men than Pakistani men and Muslim men in Britain. But that is actually irrelevant. We've got to look at what's standing in front of us and concentrate on that rather than try and deflect. And what we've had in Britain is 30 years of deflection, which is a disgrace, absolute disgrace. And it shows that our government is unable to grasp nettles, unable to take difficult decisions, unable to face difficult truths.
One of the things we're seeing is this trend to move towards the right. We're seeing it across the West in general. Germany, I reported a story earlier. Germany is moving more right. We're seeing it in France and other countries as well, Ireland. But my concern is it's that pendulum that swings. If it swings without the compass, without the lens of Jesus Christ and his one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, then I fear that it swings too far and it makes mistakes. You fall off the other side of the ship instead. Will we see that in the UK?
Well, the political situation in the UK, because we have a first past the post electoral system, is that the Labour Party won an absolute landslide with 1/3 of the votes. People didn't vote for the Labour Party with great enthusiasm, but the opposition to the Labour Party was split in a variety of ways. The Reform Party, under the leadership of Farage, is certainly in the ascendant right now. the Conservative Party has a job to try and maintain its leadership of the right against the insurgent candidacy of Farage. The thing about Farage is that he's not necessarily a very right-wing person in some respects. In many ways, he's an iconoclast and he's a liberal. And in economics, we're not quite sure where he's coming from. But the truth of the matter is there's a huge amount of anger out there because we've got a Labour Party that doesn't look after working people. We've got a Conservative Party that has conserved absolutely nothing. And we've got a Liberal Party, which is anything but liberal and democratic as it claims to be. It's a very authoritarian party in its liberalism. So we've got really big problems at the heart of our government, as do every other European nation. In France, the left has collapsed, and in Germany, things are collapsing as well. The traditional parties are shrinking.
Wow, that music means we're out of time on the radio side of our broadcast today. Reverend Dr. Alexander Lucie-Smith, which, by the way, is a novelist. He's written crime novels about the mafia and Sicily. Yes, praise be to God. I will put a link to your Substack in our show notes, as well as your X feed and your YouTube channel in the show notes today over at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. Reverend Dr. Alexander Lucie-Smith, thank you for your time. Hopefully you can hang out with us in the after show. We can continue our conversation. But coming up tomorrow, we did reschedule Bishop Joseph Strickland. He's back on the team tomorrow morning, as well as Joseph Pierce. I want to ask the question, is Shakespeare Catholic? Was Shakespeare a Catholic? I think so. Joseph Pierce thinks so. We'll be talking about that tomorrow just for fun on a Friday. Join us then. We'll see you in the after show. God love you. So what did you think of today's show? Let's discuss that right now in the after show. Your take on the after take. Comment, interact live with me and the team. All you need to do is search for one of our live video feeds on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Twitter, LinkedIn, and elsewhere. Simply search for the Station of the Cross, Joe McClain, or A Catholic Take. I'm looking forward to seeing you and interacting with you directly. It all starts right now. It's the after show.
And we're back. Welcome to the after show, everyone. And not to start anything, but Father, I saw you shaking your head at the idea that Shakespeare was Catholic. So maybe you can join us in the chat at least tomorrow for the conversation with.
Do you not
Joseph
believe
Pierce.
Shakespeare was Catholic, Father?
I don't believe Shakespeare was a Catholic. I think Shakespeare was almost certainly what the Elizabethans called a misliker. He was somebody who conformed to the Anglican Church, probably never went to church, but certainly thought the Anglican Church was an awfully bad thing and thought, oh, the good old days. But he was not an active Catholic. His father probably was. His father was, actually. There is really strong evidence his father was, but Shakespeare himself probably not, I would say.
That's interesting.
And that book by, what is she called? Claire Asquith, I think it's been admired by a lot of people, but it's certainly not admired by me, although she's a wonderful person, I'm sure. And there was also a book by Father Peter Millward many years ago called Shakespeare the Catholic. Now, I shared a tutor in English literature with Father Peter Millward. He'd been long before me. And my tutor was adamant, who was a devout Catholic herself, Daily Masker, adamant that Shakespeare was not a Catholic. And also you can't treat Shakespeare's plays like that. You can't go through Shakespeare's plays mining them for evidence, because he wasn't really dropping hints about his religious opinions, his religious beliefs.
I'm particularly fond of Macbeth. I think it's a very good one. It's one of my faves. Yes. But we'll have a very interesting conversation about that tomorrow. Maybe I'll bring up some of those points with Joseph Pierce. We'll see what he has to say about that. Let me give some shout outs to the audience. Mateus from sunny California, man. I got to tell you, it's heartbreaking to see these pictures, these images come out of the fires in California. And it kind of reminded me a wee bit of, I did this during the Hurricane Harvey thing. I did this, I've talked about it in the past. I went and helped after our family had to escape the floodwaters from our home. I went and tried to help someone else that needed help. And as I recorded some video of me doing that, and I was sharing it with my my audience to get them to help, fundraise and provide the needed supplies for the folks that are affected. And people were criticizing me because in the area that I was at the time, and I was like chest high in flood water at the time. And somebody were like, well, these are rich people. They can afford it. And I'm like, listen, I don't care if they're rich or poor. They've been impacted. And the reality is in America, we all live in debt, whether you're poor or rich. And it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy to say the least. So even though Malibu is filled with rich folk, my heart breaks for them. My heart breaks for them to have to lose their homes. Think about how many pictures did they lose of their children, of their memories, their family? You know what I mean? How many pets were lost? How many? You know what I mean? It's like it's not so much the material things as it's the other things, and also I think it's going to be bankruptcy all day long for a lot of those folks. But we'll see. God's will be done in all things. Hey, James 16897. Good morning to you, Jane. Damon, good morning to you, my friend. Thanks for hanging out with us. Trad Jack Burton, Tweed and Toe is on the team. Paul, our friend from Buffalo. Damon and Paul, yeah, it was good to hang out with both of you last night, by the way, at the Bible study. Thanks for coming by last night. I'd love to see you there. And good morning to you, T-Storm, Eileen, Mike K., our friend from sunny Virginia. Praise be to God, the brick wall. Jen Nugent, good morning to you. Thanks for being on the team today. Karen Collins is here. Pray for Texas. It's getting snow and ice today, and we don't know how to drive in any of that. So usually bad things happen. Yeah, it's probably going to be a massive pileup. Just like
nobody knows how to drive in snow and ice here.
Yeah,
how often does it
happens.
really actually snow with accumulation on the ground in winters in England?
Well, it snowed virtually everywhere in Great Britain right now, but not in my little corner. I'm looking out at bright sunshine and green grass. And generally speaking, it doesn't settle for very long.
Mm-hmm.
But occasionally when you get heavy snow, oh my goodness, then it is Armageddon. Everything stops. The whole country goes into, because it's very rare. It's very rare. Yeah.
Oh man, that's hilarious. Yeah. Anyway, I could tell horror stories of me getting in trouble in the snow. But anyway, I did want to ask you, so as you're a moral theologian as well, as a novelist, praise be to God.
Yeah.
If you had all of the authority in England, you could do whatever you wanted. How would you solve this problem of these criminal gang rapes?
I think one of the things I would have to do is the real problem, it seems to me, is our judiciary. It's like America, but in my humble opinion, not as bad as America, in that the government is constantly blocked by the judiciary. We now have a Supreme Court in Britain, which we never had before. Well, we always had a Supreme Court. It was called the House of Lords. Now we've got a Supreme Court, which has got lots of power or wants to have more power. We allow endless appeals and so on. What we've got to do is we've got to make effective the law that says if a foreigner commits a crime in Britain, they will be deported and they won't be able to come back. Because of various, that law must be enforced. But the fundamental law we have to enforce is that the will of Parliament is sovereign and the laws passed by Parliament must be regarded as having full force. Unfortunately, the government says it will do something and they can't do anything because of the law stops them. But it is Parliament that makes the laws. So we do need a slimmed down, more efficient, and I would say more ruthless administration of the law, criminal justice system. Now, of course, people also say, but we've got overflowing prisons in Britain. And just recently, the Labour government let a whole load of people out of prison early because the prisons were so overcrowded. Well, we need to stop imprisoning the wrong people. Also, the Labour government has sent down into prison imprisoned people for what they've said on Twitter, on X, or on Facebook. We need to understand that certain, I think you call them in America, white-collar crimes do not necessitate prison. Blue-collar, violent crime does necessitate prison. And there must be other ways of punishing people who fall foul of the law, such as tagging them at home, fining them, or certain types of civil penalties, taking away their driving licenses and things like that, taking away their passports. But we've got to be much more strict on criminals, because the law, as instituted, puts the criminals first, not the victims. The people who've really suffered in Rotherham, etc., the rape gang scandal, are the girls themselves and their families, whereas the perpetrators got off very lightly, and none of them got, I think, more than 10 years. And this is for gang rape of teenagers, and gang rape that is, I mean, gang rape is a polite way of putting it. There are many horrible things that went, which we can't talk about, but people can look them up on the internet. They got off really very lightly, and that just seems so wrong, that law falls over backwards to help the criminals, but not to help the victims.
Yeah, some of the descriptions of the actual incidents are gut-wrenching, to say the least. Multiple men doing things that are horrible and disgusting at the same time, and then over time. I mean, it's really disgusting to think about. And then when you read those descriptions, and you're like, why again are we too afraid to call a spade a spade? Oh, because you don't want to look like a racist? Forget about that. There is an incomplete injustice here, and the blood of Abel cries out to God for vengeance. The blood of the horrors of these young girls who are now, think about the psychological damage of these girls. I mean, PTSD. How can they become normal? Are they going to have normal relationships with a husband someday? Are they going to have normal relationships with their own children? As a result. I'm not so sure that's even possible at this point. There's so much psychological, spiritual, emotional damage that has occurred as a result of this. And then to be betrayed by your own country because they don't want to look like a racist is so disgusting to me that I can't fathom it. I really can't. And then I guess to compound that problem, you have the social media issue. So the social media, we all have a love-hate relationship with it. It can be good. It can be, in some ways, the only way you can get the truth out. And in other ways, it's an echo chamber of further insanity. So there's no easy and straightforward answer to all these problems. But in the UK, it seems from the outside looking in that you're just not allowed to have these conversations. It's forbidden, and they will come find you because of your social media posts and harass you. I've seen videos of that. That to me is further compounding the injustice. How do you see, Father, the social media aspect to these stories?
Well, I mean, a lot of stupid people saying lots of stupid things on social media.
You've been watching my X feed again, I can tell.
No. A lot of people are saying stupid things, and a lot of people saying hurtful things, a lot of people saying downright wicked things. And you know what? Shrug and move on. Don't give them an audience. They can say what they like, free speech, but you are not obliged to listen. There's also something called, well, it's not called free listening, you might call it. Don't give them an audience, move on. And that is the way to punish people who say stupid things or even wicked things on social media. Don't give them the attention they crave. And I think that's really straightforward. I don't think we need to go. And then people are always complaining about so-and-so is saying this on social media. Why are you so bothered? Please fix your mind on something that's good and true. Don't look into the gutter. And a lot of social media is like a gutter, but don't spend your time poking around the sewers with a stick to see what's there, because it ain't nice. Just move on, look upwards. I think that's really important. But there's a really important issue behind all this. You, on your banknotes in America, you have a pluribus unum, don't you? Am I right?
Yeah. Well, the last time I saw a dollar bill, it's been a long time.
Yeah, I know, it's a cash-free society. And it means from the many, unity, one. In Britain, we have this mantra, which was even repeated by King Charles, our diversity is our strength. Multiculturalism is a huge enrichment for the nation. The nation used to be really boring in the 1950s, and then it livened up in the 1960s. And now it's got even more lively because so many people have come in. Now, this may be true, but if you're going to say that, you need to prove it, by the way. You can't just take it as written. But at the same time, we have a very big problem with people who've brought into Great Britain aspects of their culture which we find repugnant. And we must say, this is repugnant. You must respect girls. You must respect women. And there's no about, oh, yes, you know, in your culture it's different and so on. The fact that girls go around in short skirts, that's their choice. And if you don't like it because you come from a country where they wear a burqa, well, tough for you. It's something you've got to accept. We dress the way we want to dress. I think that's, and so we've got to get away from this idea that multiculturalism per se is a very good thing. Multiculturalism comes with goods and it comes with bads. And of course, the country which is discovering this more than we are is several decades down the road from us, or in front of us on the road, is France. Because France has very grave problems with integration, even though it's taken an integrationist stance, the same as America does, to those coming in. Everybody has to behave as a Frenchman, just like everybody in America, as soon as they turn up, they are American. In Britain, we haven't spoken about British culture being one thing. We say, oh, no, you can keep your culture. Not necessarily, a very good idea.
You know, I find it very fascinating because the history of humans is a history of immigration. There's no exception. We all come from a background of immigrating and across this world. So I don't have an issue with that necessarily. But in America, we've always been mutts. We've always been a mix of English colonies and Dutch and German and blah blah blah. I mean, we're always even when Leif Erikson arrived here well before Christopher Columbus, with a Catholic priest in tow, by the way, he found a multicultural people of native peoples here in the Americas. Fair enough. It's the case of all human beings. I'm all right with that. But in England, but in France, but in Italy, but in Germany, but in, you know what I mean? Like there is a difference in my opinion, even though they too share that same immigrant background. England is made up of Saxons and Britons and Normans and Celtics and others. I get it, but there's still a common thread in the history of the peoples of the UK, a cultural thread. But all of a sudden now, even though you welcome all these other people from around the world, you're like, well, we need to kill our culture. Our culture needs to die. We need to adopt yours. That's suicide. That doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. In America, we've always been a melting pot. So I get it here, but
most of that immigration, Joe, was not immigration. That was invasion, and the winning invaders imposed their culture. That's what happened in England, with each succeeding wave. That's not.
Well, I want to make Anglo-Saxons great again.
No, I'm just saying that it's nowhere near the same as Irish coming over or Polish or Italians coming over and saying, okay, you can keep some of your old customs from the old country, but you got to speak English and you got to adapt to American and the American experiment or something like that. Even if that's your view of America, which I would debate, like all this other history is not the history of immigration; it's the history of invasion.
Well,
it's a history of invasion.
I mean the same thing.
And if you mean this, but if you mean the same thing, that's still different. It's the history of people coming over and saying, "We're taking over now. You're going to adopt our culture." And it even happened now when it was big enough, like in Rome, there was a blending there because it was a multicultural empire dominated by the Romans. But then the barbarians came in and they started to kind of take over. There's fuzzy areas there, but like if you're going to use England as the example,
I know, but here's the difference.
Those are invading forces.
I do mean invasion. I don't have a problem with that. That's true. Yeah, we show up and we're like, hey, we're here to stay. This is the way it is.
Yes.
But the difference in England is, and at least from the outside looking in, is, thank you, invading forces, for coming here to our country.
Yes.
We'll be happy to kill our own culture just to welcome you.
Yes, that is correct.
That's bizarre to me. It could be one thing to say, we're glad you're here, welcome, we want you to be on the team and be a part of this, but just so you know, we're not going to stop being us just because you're in the room, you know. But it seems like UK is like, we're happy to kill ourselves off just for you. I don't understand that. That seems absolutely insane.
the last successful invasion of this land, Britain, England, was in 1066. And there's no doubt that when the Normans invaded and took over, they displaced the ruling class and they changed the culture. They changed the language, they changed the food, and they changed the dress and the way of being and so on. And it was generally brought England into the European mainstream. It was the Norman conquest was traumatic for those who were conquered, but in the long term, it was very good for the country. One of the things is, of course, that this is many people who come to Britain from the former Commonwealth, from the Commonwealth or other countries, are patriots. They love Britain. I once said to a little boy in my congregation who was Brazilian, and I said, who are you going to support tonight? England was playing some other group at football. And he looked at me with incomprehension. He said, England, of course. And so the people who come here, on the whole, love it. And they think it's the most beautiful country on earth. And they're correct to do so. There's a small group, though, who regard it as the most ghastly place on earth and spend their entire time complaining about the injustice that is done to them. These people, I'm afraid to say, many of them are what are termed Islamists, people who run this outfit called Sharia for UK and so on and so forth. And they want to change Britain to be an Islamic society. They're very, very, very small in number, but they've got a lot of traction and a lot of people pay attention to them. And they should be ignored, but ignored carefully. They should be monitored, but ignored in publicity. I think that Britain is a melting pot, yes, but our cultural institutions are weakened by our cultural cringe. That is to say, we don't insist on everybody. For example, just recently somebody said, well, why don't we have the national anthem played in the cinema at the end of a film, which is the custom in Kenya, for example. They put up a little film of the flag and everybody stands up for the national anthem. It's a beautiful thing to do. We used to do that in Britain too when I was a little boy. Not anymore. Oh no, we can't do that. It would be divisive. Again, schools, wow. There was a school that wanted to put up the Union Jack in its grounds, its flag, which you do in America all over the place. And some pupils complained that they found the sight of the Union Jack triggering and divisive. And so they took down the Union Jack. Now, wow. This is the cultural fringe that is ruining things. Many of our cultural institutions are very weak because they've been hollowed out from the inside, like the House of Lords, to some extent the monarchy, and certainly the Church of England. And also the idea of rule of law, the courts, have been hollowed out, in my humble opinion. So therefore, we find it very, very hard to present a strong cultural model to people. People say we must promote British values, and everybody agrees about that, funnily enough. But nobody can agree what those British values are, and therefore we don't promote them, because it's like a polo mint. That's a mint with a hole. There's a big hole in the middle, a donut, that we say, oh, British values, looks wonderful. But in the inside, there's no content. And we have to have content-rich rather than content-light approach to British values.
Interesting. I want to tie it back to the faith. I was just, as you were talking about that, I was thinking about, like you said, what our values are. I was thinking about a book I have in my collection by Bishop John Spalding in the late 19th century. He was bishop in Baltimore. And he wrote a book called The Church, the Liberty, and Culture. Great book. Loved it. At the time in America, we were suffering. There was a party called the Know Nothings. And they were virulently anti-Catholic. They would attack priests and tar and feather them, nuns, and try to burn churches down. The Archbishop Hughes in New York, he actually threatened the mayor, who was a party of the Know Nothings. He threatened them to say, if you let these guys come out in the streets and harass us like they did in Philadelphia, I'm going to call all the Catholic men out and we'll have ourselves a little war. So good luck with that one. And as a result, he protected the churches in New York City. Praise be to God. But the Bishop John Spalding, in his book, The Church and Liberty and Culture, he talks about not only the issues of his time and the anti-Catholic movement of his time, but he talked about some of the causes that led society up to where we're at today. and he places the blame in that book very firmly at the feet of the Protestant Revolution. And he talks about, and he gives comparisons and contrasts in European countries that are Catholic versus Protestant on how people are treated in those countries. And he points out that in Catholic countries, the Protestants fare way better than in the vice versa, than in Protestant countries where Catholics are mistreated. And that's always seeming to be the case, according to Bishop John Spalding. Now, I bring that up to say this. I wonder, and I wanted to get your thought on this. I wonder if England had remained in the faith and never had revolted under Henry VIII, or had come back to the faith strongly, would England be where it is today? I mean, it may still be more secular, or maybe mass attendance is still very low, and people aren't as faithfully Catholic as they ought to be. But still, would they be where they are today if they had remained Catholic or come back to the church?
There's no question about it. We'd be much better off if we'd remained Catholic, and much happier. The critics of Catholicism would also say, although there's no way of proving either side, we would never have had the Industrial Revolution, and therefore, which is the foundation of Britain's greatness, or former greatness. A man who looked at this a great deal in the 19th century, late 18th century, was a man called William Cobbett, and who greatly lamented the end of what he saw as Merry England, to be replaced by Protestant, mercantile, commercialist, industrial England, where people were herded into factories and mistreated and so on. So I think that it's hard to say, isn't it? But I think that even though Italy is a chaotic country, I lived there for 8 years, in Italy, the social bonds are much stronger than they are in England. In Italy, people feel much more attached to their native territory. And you could always say to an Italian, where are you from? And they'll tell you which village they're from, which town they're from. And they're much more attached to their extended families than we Brits are. If you say to a British person, where do you come from? It's a pretty meaningless question, because we spend all our time moving around the country. And also, British people are not so great at hanging out with the extended family. And that is a very great pity. We're an atomized society rather than a molecular society. And we're not particularly good at joining things. So it's all rather, and that I think is because we're a post-industrial society. It's to do with industrialization. And of course, Britain was the first country to industrialize. And that tells you something, along with, of course, then came Germany, which also, but although it was the Catholic parts of Germany which were the most industrial, which is also interesting to note. And also Belgium was highly Catholic and highly industrialized as well. So it doesn't seem to be a attachment between industrialization and Protestantism. Catholics can industrialize as well. But industrialization is our main problem.
Jake, did you want to chime in?
Oh, I was just, it was interesting to hear what you're saying, because I was just reading yesterday a little bit about the history of and the uniqueness of music in Sussex, because I started reading about some English Christmas carols, and just the article made an offhand point about that the uniqueness starting to diminish when industrialization came in, because it put all these distinct regions, which has always been the case throughout human history, is that every little region is its own distinct place, and it has its own distinct dialect and culture. That all started to kind of meld together with, once it's easier to, again, like you said, travel anywhere across this small island nation. When it takes you a day to travel to the next county or whatever, now it takes you an hour to travel across the, practically across the island. So it's the industrialization removing those little cultural differences and cultural identities. It's just something that I literally just read about as happening in England and related to industrialization. So I thought that was very interesting.
To go back to the race thing,
go ahead, Father.
All of that has been happening predominantly in de-industrialized towns. Rochdale and places like that were once places with huge industry, now with no industry at all. And that brings social problems in its wake.
I wanted to give some shout outs here real quick. I did want to ask you about Tommy Robinson, though. Penn State Dad, good morning to you. Says he got a big Penn State game coming up tonight. That's interesting. Honey West 25, good morning. Says people stop arresting people in the UK for social media posts or praying near abortion facilities. I know that's the downside. Yeah. That's the bad part of that equation that I brought up earlier. DECEGLIE 68 from or Millie. I guess I should have read it. Millie from Long Island. Good morning to you, Millie. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Len Pine, Nick the Mike. Good morning to you. Thanks for hanging out with us on the Rumbles. Evelyn and Colleen and Alberto, good morning to you. I see Stephen S. here. White Wolf, John Paul Sandoval, good morning. Thanks for being on the team today. Damon Keller, good morning. Anthony, good morning. Richard, praise be to God. Restore Justice, Lost Creole, good morning to you. Gregory, good morning to you. Helen Grace, Patty B., Stephen S., good morning to you. Andrea, good morning to you. Thank you for being on the team today. Appreciate having you here. I'm seeing a bunch of people hanging out with us over on Facebook as well. Good morning to everybody. Patty, Don Franco, good morning to you. Jane Steves, iCatholicMobile.com, friend of the program, sponsor. Good morning to you, David. Thank you for being on the team today. Appreciate having you here. Mimi and Elizabeth, good morning to you. June Ybarra, our friend from West Texas, good morning to you. Hopefully you guys are doing very well today. I wanted to ask about Tommy Robinson. You talked earlier about Nigel Farage, and you gave us some sort of insight into him. But Tommy Robinson's another one of these. It's from the outside looking in. I often wonder, what don't I know about these characters? Because on one hand, I can relate, and that's that natural anger and frustration we have, and he's speaking out against it, and I'm like, that's good. I want him to speak out against it. But then, as I said earlier, I worry about that pendulum swinging too far without the compass and the lens of Jesus Christ. I don't want a secular version of the far right. I want a Catholic version of looking at the world through the Catholic lens, let the chips fall where they may, wherever they may fall. And I don't see that with Tommy Robinson. How do you see him?
I believe he's a Catholic. I've heard that he is a Catholic.
Interesting. I didn't know.
Yeah, I don't know, but I believe he's not particularly religious. The thing about Tommy Robinson that's rather been obscured is he's in jail for a very serious crime. And the serious crime is contempt of court. That is to say, he was sentenced for, I think, libel, and then he insisted on repeating the libel. And so he was eventually imprisoned. Now, to be imprisoned for contempt of court, you have to antagonize a court pretty strongly. He sees himself as a martyr, but contempt of court is a serious crime. Tommy Robinson certainly says what a lot of people are thinking. I think people in Parliament and so on would say that Tommy Robinson is simplistic in his analysis and in his solutions. They'd probably say that about me as well. A lot of people. Oh, you don't realize how complicated it is. But the Farage, when he was running UKIP, acted as a pressure group on the Conservatives. So the Conservatives had to tack to the right to keep UKIP happy and to stop their voters hemorrhaging to UKIP. Tommy Robinson will now act in the same way on the right to keep the Reform Party on what he conceives as the right path. Undoubtedly, most people in Britain are against uncontrolled immigration, and this is the major platform for Tommy Robinson. It's uncontrolled immigration must be stopped. The Conservatives said they would stop it, but under their governments, it just grew and it grew and it grew. So until some government gets a grip of that, and particularly of the illegal immigrants, the legal immigration and illegal immigration, both of them need to be curbed. Until that happens, Tommy Robinson is in business because he's got a unique selling point, and that is he points out that no government, whether it's left-wing or right-wing, seems to be able to stop immigration or even want to stop immigration.
I've said often on the program, we're talking about politics here in America. Donald Trump just won the election. He's about to be inaugurated. He ran on a platform of doing something about the immigration crisis in our country. And I believe he has the intention to do so. But I also don't believe we're actually going to solve the problem. Do you feel that is as similar in the UK? I mean, even if they have the best intentions to fix this problem, are they capable of it?
Many of them say the problem can't be solved, therefore we've got to accept it. And that does seem defeatist. I think Farage has said something which I do think is rather reasonable. It's a bad problem. At least we must do something to make sure it doesn't get any worse.
Yeah.
And there are certain things we can do to make sure it doesn't get any worse. And one thing, of course, is stop encouraging illegal immigration, which is what effectively we're doing. But unfortunately, any attempt to try and staunch it, there's a very vociferous group which essentially believes in open borders, although they don't say that openly. And all governments are terrified of the commentariat, the people who seem to rule the airwaves.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can improve our situation when it comes to illegal immigration. I'm just not convinced that we can solve it. I think we will still have a very fractured system. I think we need to do everything we can to make it better and maybe roll back some of the consequences that we've been suffering from. But I don't think we're going to truly solve it. And I think whatever they come up with, whatever plan, I think will not be a very smooth one. It'll be whatever it is. They may do their best. I mean, just assume the best of them. They may try their best. They may do their best. But at the same time, whatever it is, I think it'll be clunky and it will be filled with all kinds of downsides and issues and complications. And I think America, although feels very strongly right now that it wants mass deportations and it wants a strong, heavy hand in curbing illegal immigration, I think once they begin to implement these policies, I think they're going to see a turn in public opinion of that, because they're not going to like some of the clunkiness that they see. How do you untangle the cartels that are in every major American city right now? How do you untangle that and not have downsides? I think we should, but at the same time, I think it's going to get very ugly. And I wonder how much support for that will continue in the next few years as they begin to roll out that plan. And in Europe, it seems, I guess one of the question I had for you was, how do you feel about England's Brexit? Do you feel England should have left the EU? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Because in the EU, it seems like they are now, they definitely don't want all of this crazy immigration, but at the same time, they're so DEI focused that they can't get out of their own way. Also, they're stuck, and it doesn't seem like there's no going back at this point. The Normans have invaded, and it's over.
No going back on Brexit. Brexit has happened. Now we must make the best of it. And I do feel that our governments, since the vote took place, have not made the best of it. There's a great deal that still needs to be done. We do need, I would say, in both church and state, we need one thing: leadership. And leadership is lacking. Or we do get some sort of populist leadership, which may not be the best, but really good leadership it seems to be in short supply. And we are waiting in hope for the coming of a saviour. Jesus Christ, of course, is our saviour. But in the secular sphere, we do need somebody who gets something done. And I think that if you go back to the person who was Prime Minister when I was a lad, Mrs. Thatcher, she certainly was a great leader. She certainly wasn't frightened of anybody. She certainly got things done, although maybe that was more apparent than real. But she had guts, and we need somebody with a bit of guts. Ronald Reagan is your equivalent of Mrs. Thatcher, and he certainly had guts, I
think. Yeah, for sure. Rob, Flying Tigers, good morning to you, my friend. Policicho, mi amigo, good morning. Thanks for hanging out with us today. I heard the other day, Policicho, that you were trying to influence my wife to take a crucifix that you had to offer. So I got to go look that up, because my kids came out to tease me about something you were saying on one of your live streams. So praise be to God. Thank you again. By the way, if you don't know, Policicho, my friend here in Houston, This big Station of the Cross that sits behind me is his. It's on loan from my good friend, and he has a long history of providing beautiful decorations for my sets, and so I couldn't be more grateful to you. Thank you for doing it. I was trying to look back at there was a comment that I missed. I wanted to go back and find it. Now I can't seem to put my hands on it. That's too bad. Jimmy Z, good morning to you. I'm still trying to wrap my head. I see some comments about Greenland in there and Donald Trump. I'm still trying to wrap my head around that, the whole Greenland thing, to be honest with you. I'm not totally convinced it's for shipping lanes. I just don't buy that. International waters are international waters. Make an icebreaker and be about your merry business. You know what I mean? You can't stop Russia, China, or any other country from sailing across international waters, whether you own Greenland or not. So I'm not buying that's the reason. Maybe there's other reasons, like missile bases and other types of government facilities that we want to put in that location. I think that might be more at the heart of what's going on there.
Alaska was the bargain of the century. And at the time when the president bought Alaska, he was roundly mocked and criticized. But it turns out it was the greatest bargain ever made in human commerce. So I think possibly buying Greenland might be similar. I'm afraid I have to go now because my lunch is waiting for me.
God bless you, Father. We loved having you on. Thank you so much.
We're on the different time zone to you. Okay, thank you very much for having me. Thanks for everything, and all the very best, and God bless your work.
God bless you too. Thank you, Father. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Father.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye. Getting warm, says Lightsten.
Greenland's getting warm? That'd be great. Maybe I'll move there.
I think we're getting warmer. That it's getting closer. Is Greenland getting warmer? I don't know that Greenland can be warm. I don't care what they say about it.
Actually, that's correct. I believe in the capital of Nuuk, or however you pronounce it.
Nuuk?
The range is like 20 degrees Fahrenheit to 50 degrees Fahrenheit on an average year. So that's the average range of temperatures. So it never really gets above 50.
50 degrees. You're going to be out in flip-flops and jackets.
I believe Greenland is where they had the coldest recorded ever temperature. I believe it was in Greenland.
Are you sure about that?
Not Antarctica.
I don't know. I thought it was Siberia.
There was. Hang on. Where I was reading about this. Where is it about the climate?
Temp in world location. We're googling this. Of course.
In the northern hemisphere. In the coldest temp in the northern hemisphere
all
ever.
Of a sudden, now you want to make it northern hemisphere.
That's what it says. It says it was
the coldest temperature ever recorded on Earth, according to our AI overlord, was measured at Vostok Station in Antarctica, where a temperature of minus 89.2 degrees Celsius or minus 128.6 Fahrenheit was recorded July 21st, 1983. How old were you in 1983, Jake?
Negative 12.
You were negative 12.
Well, if temperatures can go negative.
In 1983. 1983. Wasn't that the year right before Beat It came out? Or what year did Beat It come out?
Beat It? I think it was 84.
Michael
Wasn't Thriller 84?
Jackson.
I think Thriller album came out in 84.
Beat It.
84 is a good year.
Beat It. What year was this? 82. Beat It was released in 82.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why was I thinking 84?
Well, you're thinking of Thriller. It's a different album.
No. Beat It is from the Thriller album, isn't it?
No, Beat It's its own album.
Is it?
Yeah.
No,
Beat It's got its own album.
Beat It's from his sixth studio album, Thriller. I was just thinking that Thriller came out in 84. I was wrong. 82.
Album.
How did I get that wrong?
Thriller. Oh, I guess you're right.
Okay. Wait a second. Okay. So Thriller was released late in 82, in November, and it spent a record 37 non-consecutive weeks at number one from February 26, 1983 to April 14th, 1984. So maybe that's what I had in my head for 84.
See how we go from coldest temperature to Michael Jackson, just like that. I mean,
Mike, that's what I said is northern hemisphere, not coldest temperature in the world. Coldest temperature in the world ever recorded was down in Antarctica, as Joe reported. But coldest temperature, what I read was coldest temperature in the northern hemisphere was actually in Greenland. It wasn't up in Siberia. It was in Greenland, and it reached negative 93.3 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah, I should read better. I thought it was. I completely breezed over Northern Hemisphere until I reread it just now. And in Nuuk, the average daily temperature varies over the seasons from 22.8 degrees Fahrenheit to 49.8 degrees Fahrenheit.
Are you saying in Nuuk, Greenland is where we're going to keep our Nuuks?
Oh, there you go.
Is that what you're saying?
The nuclear weapons. There you go. Greenland's huge, by the way.
It's huge.
It's huge. It's enormous.
It's a great island. I believe Greenland is the best of islands. You've never seen an island like this island.
And they got
gotta have it.
They got a polar bear on their coat of arms. Like, who doesn't like that?
My buddy Elon says we gotta have Greenland. We're gonna buy Greenland because Elon, the rocket man.
We're gonna name it Elon Land.
Elon Land. We're gonna. What do you think of renaming the Gulf of Mexico?
Ooh, here's an awesome painting called "Summer Night off the Greenland Coast, circa year 1000" by Carl Rasmussen. This is a cool painting. Viking ship, and there's whales all around it, and an iceberg. This is a great painting. Anyway, Greenland. Make Greenland great again. I don't know.
Greenland.
Make Greenland green again. Let's terraform Greenland. Let's turn it into a Hyperborean paradise.
Apparently, the Canadians are upset at Donald Trump because he talked about Canada becoming the 51st state.
Mm-hmm.
Why would they be upset about that? Becoming America would be an improvement, don't you think, over what you got now?
I really think it's funny when people who clearly have nothing but self-hatred and self-loathing for their own culture and people get mad when someone else says, well, if you don't care about your own country, like, well, we'll just take it over. Like the English. The English are very mad that Elon Musk is daring to interfere in our British affairs over here in the UK. But then they will happily say, oh, yeah, we English have no culture and we have no seasoning in our food and no flavor and we have no civilization and we should let everyone from all corners of the world come in and make us cool and hip and wonderful and like it's like okay,
yeah,
so why are you mad about Elon Musk? Oh, it's because he's calling out that kind of behavior where you're welcoming in people to come and rape your daughters. Like, okay,
I just don't understand this whole. Is it really just liberal progressivism or is it guilt from colonialism?
Well, those are the same thing. Those are the same thing. Those are indistinguishable from each other. Like maybe back in the day, you could have a branch of progressivism that had a certain pride, like Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt was a progressive, but he had certain natural virtues, shall we say? Like he was a pretty manly guy. He went out swimming and hunting and did the national parks and all that. He was pretty patriotic. He was pro-America. Back in the day, you could have a strain of liberalism and progressivism that was still patriotic in that way and still, wasn't guilty about colonialism and things like that. But it quickly morphs. That ideal quickly decays. Just like, conservatism in the U.S., which is really just liberalism, but 10 years behind, that just keeps decaying until suddenly like, oh, well, let's just have LGB without the T. It's the T's that are the problem. Like, let's just go back to having, good old-fashioned LGB. Really? That's why I say, like, no, woke's not retreating. Woke's not retreating until at the very least, Obergefell gets overturned. And
not then either.
Yeah, and then not then either. You're still a long way off. But I won't believe that there is even a retreat possibly underway until that happens. And that's just the opening salvo. So,
and Tim brings up a great point. Tim from Wimbledon, the UK Labour Party rely on Muslim votes, and Father said that in the show. Actually, they rely on Muslim votes. If they took action against this, they'd lose the vote. So how do you fix that then? So they're playing politics. It's like in Minnesota, right? So there's St. Paul, in Minnesota, there's such a large Muslim community there that's why they get, these Muslims in Congress, for instance. It's just, I don't know how you fix that at that point. You've given yourself over to these large communities and you're playing politics. You're not doing what's right for the country. You're doing what's right so that you can have a job. And maybe you argue, well, if I get the job, then I can do what's right for the country. Well, are you doing what's right for the country at that point? It doesn't appear to be, because if you're turning a blind eye to the insanity of grooming and molesting and raping children, then you are definitely not doing what's right for your country. And there's the old Catholic principle: error does not get its day in court. This whole modern idea that we should be tolerable to everybody and all of their ideas is just wrong. It's just wrong. It's not in keeping with Catholic theology and philosophy and thought and natural law. Damon says, Joe, Greenland and Canada cannot protect the Davis Strait of the Northern Passage, which has strategic consideration for Alaska, which is not connected to the lower 48. Okay, fair enough. So we have to have a presence up there in order to protect the passage. Fair enough. But you still can't restrict Russia, China, Iran, anybody else. A guy with a fishing boat, you can't restrict them from sailing in international waters. So we'll have a presence there. But if there is a submarine, a Chinese submarine that's floating around up there, and decides to launch its nuclear weapons at us, what's a destroyer going to do? What's a battleship going to do?
Can you drive
Not
drunk
much.
in international waters?
Can you drive drunk in international waters?
Like, I'm
going to say no.
Are there international waters police?
It is. I'm going to say no. It is impossible to drive drunk in any water whatsoever, international or
icebergs are in international waters.
You cannot
The North
drive drunk in any body of water whatsoever. You could sail. You could motor
does
your
a lake
boat around.
does a lake stop being a lake just because it's frozen over?
Well, you can't drive
on a lake, on a
drunk
frozen
in
lake.
Water. How do you drive in water?
Drive on water. You're driving on a frozen lake. You're driving on frozen water.
Sail. You could sail on water.
Do you sail a snowmobile onto the lake to ice fish when it's frozen over?
Okay, you got me on technicality there.
I only asked because Top Gear did it, because Jeremy Clarkson and James May were having gin and tonics on their way up to the North Pole. So I'm wondering if that's actually true. Can you drive drunk? Can you sail drunk in international waters? Let's go with that. Can you go full pirate? That's my question.
Well, okay, that's a good question. There's no international navy.
Yeah, there's no
international Coast Guard. But there are Coast Guards and navies that are near those countries that will. In fact, there's a YouTube channel that I'm watching who is Arctic Sailing, and they're from Sweden. They bought a boat in California, renovated it, and they're sailing it all around the Arctic back to the Arctic waters. And they got boarded by Canadian Coast Guard recently. So, I mean, I suppose as you go along and you encounter these governments, they can come out and board you or whatever. But there is no international force. I mean, I guess you could say America is the international police, right? So having a base in Greenland,
America, world police,
where we could house our nuclear weapon arsenals,
it's all just
black bases.
It's all just more precincts for the world police. That's what we're installing.
Our MK Ultra training facility could be in Greenland. There's lots of potential.
As long as we can just we can clone Reginald Vell Johnson to make him, chief. It's all either Reginald Vell Johnson or, of course, Bruce Willis, just in charge.
Or Bruce Willis.
Those are our two.
Can we clone
two
Bruce
flavors.
Willis without the?
Those are our two flavors of.
If you
of police.
clone him, though, at this point, will you also get his cognitive decline?
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Does that come with the DNA package, or is that separate? How does that work exactly? I don't know.
Los Creole, that's a good point, because when we used to have VBC at our parish for a while, which was Vespers, beer, and Compline. We'd sing Vespers and then go out to a local brewery and then come back for Compline. C always sounded better after a decent amount of B. It always sounded a little better than V. Los Creole says, "I do things better when drunk." That's how you know he's got French ancestry.
That's so sad. Damon says,
"I'm just saying. Hey, look, compare stoner societies to alcoholic societies. Like one of them.
I don't want either.
I
choose neither.
Alcoholic societies built civilization. That's the Romans. Those roads are still around. Those viaducts still work. Meanwhile, stoner societies, they were just hiding in the swamps up in
back
England.
in California. Hey man, what is this What is it? Look, it's a campfire outside. That's great, man.
Let's
Pass the
let's
gummies.
imagine if we did something and then not
Pass
do
the
it because we're sitting on the couch eating.
I'll take neither for 200. Thanks, Alex. Hey, Damon says
Joe hates viaducts.
It's about control given Trump wants the Panama Canal back, as well as which China has taken financial control over. The two together, Davis Strait and Panama Canal, gives us Western control. Okay, makes sense. I get that. I can get that. Yeah, China's been at this a long time. China was well at this when Trump was president the last time. So why didn't he do this the last time? The Belt and Road Initiative of the Chinese government has got its financial tentacles in the entire world at this point. So you build another canal? Okay, great. Build it in Mexico if you want. They're talking about doing it there. Fine, fair enough. You don't think China's going to get its tentacles in that? Of course they are. All of our stuff is made in China, shipped on ships, some of which are owned by China, and they're coming through the canals. You don't think they're going to get their money into that canal as well? You can build anything you want. They're still going to get involved. So
I think we should dig a new canal along the border with Mexico. Then we don't have to build a wall. It's just a moat.
That's brilliant.
Just a moat filled with sharks and freighters. No one's going to try crossing that. They're going to get run over by a tanker.
And then we can invite the where was that place? Somalia. We can invite the Somalians to come and expand their operation for attacking container ships in the moat to further keep resistance between us and the cartels. So just one more layer of security.
I don't want Mexico as a state. I want to make Mexico an empire again. I want to bring the Mexican empire
under the
back.
Habsburgs.
Of course.
That's how you do it.
Just let them have it.
You wouldn't bring it back to Spain. You'd bring it back to the Habsburgs.
I don't think Spain wants it. That's the problem.
Well, that's beside the point. Would you bring it back to Spain?
Oh, well, I mean, if we're really restoring everything, then yes, just make Spain again. Make Spain great again.
Spain again.
Spain is a fascinating situation because they built this huge, vast empire, and then Portugal was still just hanging out right there next to them. Like they didn't take it over. I mean,
right.
There's been history there.
Well,
There's been wars.
That's because
there have been wars.
The Portuguese make a lot of wine.
Yeah, exactly. It's all that Madeira. But it's
all that drunkenness, like you said earlier, that they're just able to hold off the Spanish Armada.
All those Mediterranean empires built on wine. But I think that's funny, and I think it's sweet. Like they sorted out their differences eventually. There was definitely some warfare and personally all this kind of stuff. But they sorted it out, and then they're just like, yeah, you can hang out there and be allied with England for whatever reason, and we'll just build our empire overseas. So and then lose it.
Oh, I got to tell you, all of the problems we face in the world, no easy solutions, no easy answers to any of it.
Everyone's
Restore justice. Has a lot of yelling.
Those capital letters are contagious.
Oh boy. A restore justice is China has 2 ports on each end of the Panama Canal. Trump did not do it last time because he was fighting against the swamp. Okay, fair enough. I guess then we've passed it. Time to see what's in it. Will he pull it off this time? We're about to find out. Where I would, hey, we'll see. Hopefully he will. But I'm not convinced that we're going to see a tremendous amount of change, but I'd love to be wrong. Trust me, I would. Tim from Wimbledon says, what about restoring the monarchy in France? Answers, please. I'm up for that. I'm okay. I'm on that team. I think we should restore monarchies. I think we should make monarchies great again, personally.
Come on, Tim. Don't you know that we need to spread democracy and republicanism to all corners of the earth? That we're going to have no king but
how does that
our
work
Lord?
Out for us, by the way?
No king but Jesus. That's how that works. We got to spread that. If it's good for Americans, it's good for everyone else. So why should we have Catholic monarchs? Why should we hope for another Louis IX or another Stephen of Hungary or another Queen Jadwiga of Poland? Why should we hope for that when we need to spread good American republicanism? We're a democratic republic. Why shouldn't everyone be a democratic republic if it's that great?
And by the way, we do come bearing gifts when we spread our democracy around the world. Things like abortion and contraception and gay marriage and all the rest. So
LGB, maybe we won't even bring the
You're
tea.
welcome.
We'll just bring the LGB, the good
we'll
stuff.
leave the tea at home just for you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
We'll just bring you that good old-fashioned LGB.
Colin says, Queen Latifah of New York. Oh wow, Queen Latifah. I haven't heard of Queen Latifah in years. She's
the not the Punisher. She's the what is it? The who was Denzel Washington?
Who is Denzel Washington?
Queen Latifah's the new Denzel Washington. The
what?
What do you call it? Not the executor. What's his name? The
Oh, she's the Equalizer.
The Equalizer.
You're
That's it.
kidding.
Yeah, Queen Latifah's been the Equalizer for like 10 years now.
Oh.
That's DEI for you, John.
Fairy dust everywhere. What are we talking? Come, stop it. Stop it. Does she drive a Jaguar?
I don't know. Let me see. Where's the
What's the car? She has to drive a Jaguar.
Where's the TV show?
Jaguar. It's a Jaguar. But I think they say Jaguar in England, don't they?
No, in England they say Jaguar.
They say with hard J? Jaguar?
Jaguar.
I thought they softened that, no?
No, it's Jaguar. We say Jaguar. They say Jaguar.
Jaguar.
Yep.
Jaguar.
Yeah, The Equalizer is an American crime drama television series that premiered on CBS 2021. Oh, okay, I thought it'd been around for even longer than that.
Why?
Yeah.
Do they do these things?
With Queen Latifah
like
starring
Denzel
as the
Washington.
titular character.
I love Denzel. He's my favorite actor. Probably.
Queen Latifah as Robin McCall, a.k.a. The Equalizer, a divorced single mother and former CIA operative who acts as a street vigilante for justice. It sounds like a parody. It's so...
Why? Why? By the way,
so
who was it? Were we talking to somebody recently? Or maybe it was my friend at church, the Hollywood screenwriter guy. I think it was him that was telling me this. That Hollywood can't seem to learn its lessons. That statistically speaking, female lead films and shows do not perform well. Male-led movies and shows do way better in general.
The goal is ideological.
I know that. You and I both know that, but it's like if you're a worldly, greedy Hollywood production company, you can't even learn that lesson?
Well,
like, you know what I mean?
sometimes they make a call and write it off. They literally filmed, and I think had mostly done all the post-production, editing, and everything on a Batwoman movie with a black lead. And
well, okay,
but a Batwoman
was always a female character.
I'm saying
always female character. Like Equalizer was a male character.
Well, because they can capitalize on the name recognition, you might still get that initial hit of money on the name recognition. You know, this is what they do. This is why there's no original ideas. If you came up with a good original story that had a female as the lead character, or a black man as the lead character, or whatever, the first Equalizer. The Equalizer was a hit, wasn't it? With Denzel Washington as the male lead.
Right.
Alien was a success with a female as the eventual hero, which again goes along with it being a horror movie. That often happens. You have a final girl for the horror movie plot. That happens with a lot of horror films. But if you come up with a good original idea, that can take off if you do it right and you write it correctly, and the character isn't clearly a male character that they then switched in a female actress for. That doesn't work. People can see through that and they'll dislike it. But the reason you see Hollywood bringing back all these other titles is because they can say, okay, people like insert franchise or film or TV show here, bring it back and make it properly, call it woke. You want to cut DEI or whatever. I don't particularly like those buzzwords because they get used not the way that they really mean. But we'll bring Star Wars back and make all the main characters either female, black, or otherwise ethnic. And the old white guy Luke is a failure. Type of thing. So that's
Murder, She Wrote should be a dude. They should make a guy play
they'll
Angela.
Never.
In Murder, She Wrote.
Murder, He Wrote.
Murder he wrote.
See,
Exactly.
they'll never do that because that's
Okay.
the opposite of their ideological
I have a weird
goals.
look at this. So if you have a fictional character who was traditionally white, like Equalizer, and later you use a black man to portray that character, I'm less bothered by that. I just am. Is the actor good? Then I'm all right with it. If that was a real person that they're portraying, though, a historical person, then I don't think you should play shenanigans with that. You should do what you can to portray that person as closely as you can. Their race, their ethnicity, their culture, etc. So, like Denzel Washington playing Equalizer, I'm all right. I love Denzel as an actor. I'm good with it. He's entertaining. He's a great actor. I have no issues with that. But Queen Latifah, that's ridiculous, and nobody should be tolerating it.
People are saying they just made Matlock a lady too.
You're kidding.
Yeah, they just brought back Matlock with Kathy Bates playing Matlock.
How do these people? Who was watching these things?
Pardon me.
Why do we continue to give them money?
So a couple of people are saying the original Equalizer was a white guy, Robert McCall.
I know. That's what I just said.
There was. Oh, I missed you saying because I was
grew up
reading the
watching.
comments.
That's why I said Jaguar, because he drove a Jaguar in that television.
I didn't know there was an original older one. I forgot about.
Really?
That.
Oh wow.
I probably knew it when I first read about.
Yeah, and he was
Equalizer
not like, and unlike
cool.
Denzel Washington, who can portray. Denzel does a great job, especially for his age. He's no spring chicken, but he can actually do movie fights pretty good. Like he sells it very well. Robert McCall never did any of that. Okay, he was a slightly chubby British fellow who drove a Jaguar and always wore like a trench coat or something. You know what I mean? Like he didn't beat anybody up necessarily. He did have a gun, but he was always very dry British.
Well, again, part of that is characterization, like and just acting according to a character. You know, when you're switching out, when you've got when you're doing this kind of fantasy version of As You Like It. Much Ado About Nothing. When you're doing this kind of fantasy version of Much Ado About Nothing, and you have Denzel Washington playing a role in that, and you're ignoring any aspect of race or ethnicity or whatever.
Another
like that.
version of John Wick is all it is.
Yeah. Well, what?
The Equalizer.
I thought you were talking about Much Ado About Nothing.
No, the Equalizer film.
I'm using Much Ado About Nothing because Denzel Washington was in Much Ado About Nothing, the one from the 90s. I'm saying you can plug Denzel Washington into that role where you're not really dealing with issues of race or ethnicity because you're just like, well, let's just have actors and have it be fun, and it doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense. It doesn't matter if Denzel Washington and Keanu Reeves are supposed to be brothers or whatever, or half brothers, whatever it is. Like, who cares? We're just casting that. It's a kind of a fantasy makeup or whatever. That'd be different for something like Othello, where the whole point is that the one character is a Moor, right?
Right.
And maybe you want to do a swap where Othello is a white guy and everyone else is black or something like that. Like, I don't know.
Denzel's Macbeth.
Yeah, and then you're like, well, that's a historical play, but maybe you're doing it at
but it was always fictional.
Shakespeare's
based on an actual event.
Yes, Shakespeare's an interesting case because of the potential for adapting it in different and inventive ways. It's just that when you're doing it, there are ways where it doesn't make sense, like with a play like Othello, or The Merchant of Venice. That doesn't make sense if Shylock's not Jewish in any way because his character is Jewish, right? That's how that works. So there's a difference, but then that's also different from saying, well, this character is written like a man, let's plug a woman in, because that's completely disregarding the difference between men and women, which is very different from the difference between ethnic peoples, where there's a lot more variance. Men and women, for the most part, are very different. So you have a character that's acting like a man, but it's being played by a woman. You can tell, oh well, that ain't right. A woman wouldn't do that. A woman wouldn't say that, except maybe in certain circumstances. Like even a character, a real person like Joan of Arc, even though she's doing certain roles that are traditionally ascribed to men, she's still being a woman about it. She's still being a girl, a young girl. Like she's not doing it she's not acting like a man in that way. She's doing certain things that are normally done by men, but she's still being a woman.
Yeah.
And so that's why a portrayal of her where it's just like, oh, here's Joan of Arc as if it was a male character, but it's a girl doing it because feminism or something. Like that's why that doesn't work. But a role where it's like, oh, here's an actual woman called to do a certain act that normally a man should be doing, and how is this happening? Like, that's a real thing that happened, and you can portray that well. So there's that's a big difference, and that's why, you know, sometimes the swapping out of ethnicities and races and stuff, sometimes that's just a matter of acting. That's just a matter of portraying someone.
Yeah.
I mean, British actors portrayed, you know, Arabs and stuff like that all the time in older films. You know, they don't let them get away with it now, but like Ben-Hur has Hugh Griffiths, I think, or Richard Griffiths, whatever his name is, won an Oscar for playing the Sheik. And he does a great job.
How many Hollywood films?
You know?
How many Hollywood films portrayed Native American Indians, but through white actors?
Actually, it was mostly like
you watch The Searchers, and they used actual Native American Indians to play those.
A lot
roles.
of times it was
great.
The actors playing Native Americans were either Italian or Jewish, which is really funny.
Yeah, Italian.
But that's the thing is, like, you can there's a certain level there where you're acting, you're wearing makeup, you're putting on a different
acting.
character.
I get it.
Yes.
But
it's different when it's male and
ideology.
female. You know, there's
this
a different
ideology that they're trying to do. Restore Justice brought up Jack Reacher movies. I think that's interesting because Tom Cruise, who played Jack Reacher in the movie side, versus this, I forget the actor's name now, the big hulking guy who plays in on the television series side, on the Prime Video series side. From what I understand, I haven't read like the books involved in this. I don't really know, but from what I heard, that this new guy, the big hulking guy, he apparently is closer to the original vision from the books than Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise is a small, short guy, and this other guy is tall and bulking, and that was the original idea. So I thought that was interesting that in that circumstance, they didn't go more DEI or crazy. They went to the actual original concept of it. Very, very fascinating. Tradish Mom brings up another sort of example. She says, what about Lin-Manuel Miranda as Hamilton? Something we've talked about in the past. Hamilton, I have this weird fascination with, not because I love it, but because it's so novel that you just sit there in wonderment to experience it. You're just like, what am I looking at here? What are we doing here? Like, it's just so interesting from a novelty perspective. She says also there was recently a production of 1776 with all women and non-binary people. That's a train wreck from day one.
Some people are making good points here. Like, how about let's have Denzel Washington play Adolf Hitler?
Right? I wouldn't be up for that. I would not be up for that.
Let's see him. Why not?
I like Denzel as an actor, and he can certainly portray any character through skill. But at the same time, that's a historical person.
Yes, exactly.
I would not be.
It doesn't make sense. But
neither would a female.
But could you?
Hitler.
But again, Joe, like, could a Polish Irish actor portray Hitler well?
Could a Polish Irish actor portray who?
Hitler.
Yes.
Okay.
I think the goal here is.
I'm just saying. There's a range of things here that make sense and don't make sense, right? Like,
exactly.
you can't just make a blanket statement about something like this. But there are differences. Like, it doesn't make sense to have Denzel Washington play Hitler. It doesn't make sense to have Zendaya play, I don't know, George Washington or something like that. You know,
right?
But you can have someone who's not German at all play a German and act as a German pretty well. And so where do you draw the line on that? Can you we have a Somali character. Let's cast a West Ghanaian, to play the Somali character. Like, okay, well,
I think
to a certain extent, you're not being more accurate there, but you can't, there's.
But I think it makes sense to say, okay, we have a character who's historically a white person or a black person or some other kind of person. Then we need someone who can portray that very authentically.
Yep.
Whether or not they're actually of the same race or heritage, rather, background, is neither here nor there when it comes to a actor who could look like that person very easily and has great skill and could pull it off.
Sure.
And also might have a name that you might be able to attach to your project, which helps to sell it more, get investors and distribution. So there's a lot of factors you're going to think about there.
Yep.
But when you take a character and you you intentionally switch it up from you're just playing ideology at that point, and you deserve at that point to lose your money in the process, in my humble opinion.
Yeah. Well, and
but
again,
I don't
why
have an issue with finding a Ghanaian to play a Somalian, because most people aren't going to know those differences.
Yeah. So again, it's a range. But going back to what your original point was, and we should be ending now, but going back to what your original point was, that's why they keep bringing back old franchises. That's why they take The Equalizer. Oh, people remember The Equalizer name. I didn't, but people remember The Equalizer name, the old show. Let's take Denzel Washington and put him in it. Maybe that wasn't even DEI driven. Maybe that was just like, Denzel's cool. People liked Denzel. Let's take that and we'll get the name recognition. That'll get butts in the seats. That'll get people watching.
Damon brings up.
That's how we make our money.
Damon's throwing yet another log on the fire here. We're supposed to be well done, but I think this is fascinating. No matter what Jay has to think about it. Damon Keller says Eddie Murphy played a white person on SNL very convincingly. I remember that skit. I remember it very well, and I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah.
So that's a question. Funny. Imagine if Denzel Washington put on makeup, had a costume, whatever, but the makeup department made him actually look like Adolf Hitler. Would we accept that? Would we be okay with that? If he do it
convincingly, that would be interesting.
If he pulled off a German accent, or spoken German, for instance, or something like that, would we be all right? I'm curious.
I would be fascinated by that if that could
would
be
we be offended by the whiteface, as Gregory points out?
I don't think I would be offended by a black person convincingly wearing whiteface to play Adolf Hitler. I don't think I would be offended by it. I would just be fascinated by it. It's an amazing idea. Like
if it's Denzel, I could tolerate a lot, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
I just like him as an actor.
Sure.
I think he's a great actor.
Like if he
was
let's
trying,
say this, I would be fascinated.
If he was trying, hold on, let me just make this one last point. Sure. If he was trying to be sincere in his portrayal, I think I'd be okay with that.
Yeah,
I really.
That's
do.
what I'm saying. Is like if someone was trying really hard and did a really convincing job. A good black actor, let's say Denzel Washington, did a really convincing job of in full makeup and everything and acting and accent or language or whatever of playing King Jan Sobieski in a movie about the siege of Vienna. Like I'd be a little like, oh, you couldn't find a good Polish actor to just do that. Like, but I also would be like, that's fascinating and props to him for pulling it off if he could pull it off. Like I would be fascinated by that. I wouldn't particularly be offended. I would be offended if they were just like, oh well, let's get that black guy from that Nope horror movie or whatever because he's been in a lot. Let's get him and cast him as again King Jan Sobieski, like just as a black guy playing King Jan Sobieski. I'd be like,
Can I admit
that's
something?
not how that works.
Can I admit one thing about this? Some tangents related to this.
Yeah.
I often get annoyed when we see American-produced films with American accented characters that are played by English actors.
You don't like English people with American accents?
Like, why you couldn't find any Americans to play these characters? Really? Like they all had like half the cast is from England. I mean, and they do a great job with their accents. They do fantastic job. But I just don't it never really. I'm like, I don't know what. It's not as often in the reverse. It does happen that Americans will sometimes fake a British accent and play in British productions, but it's not quite as often.
Yeah.
It's very often in the reverse where English actors are playing in American films. And I just never quite understood that. There's plenty of Americans that'll act and can act and are good at it. Why don't you tap them? I just never understood. A good example is when, what's his name? Daniel Day-Lewis played that American communist. What was his name?
Abraham Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln. That's right.
Got it.
That's
Boom.
the guy. That's the guy right there.
Why are our brains synced for a terrifying moment
A little dig right there. A little dig. But I mean, Daniel Day-Lewis is an incredible actor. He's so amazing and capable as an actor.
Well, again, there's that transformation bit.
And he played it really, really well in that Spielberg film, but There was nobody else available?
Arleon says Joe pretty much described Black Hawk Down. Yeah, I mean, well, again, that's made by a British director. It's made by Ridley Scott. But yeah, half the actors in that are British, playing American soldiers and fighting in Somalia. So for Jay, I'll use as an example. Like it'd be weird if Denzel Washington in full makeup played Saint Pope John Paul II. You know, that'd be very odd. But if he could convincingly do it in full makeup, trying to as accurately play Saint Pope John Paul II as accurately as possible, I'd be fascinated by that. I don't think I'd be offended. Whereas if they were just like, oh yeah, we'll just make him a black guy, that ain't right. You know?
Or
right.
if you've got Tom Cruise playing a German with no accent.
I didn't like that, but I could forgive it because I forgive it when they make all the bad guys just have, like, if you have your German, your Nazi character and he's just got a British accent. I forgive that more than I forgive an American accent, so I have to kind of on principle say I can forgive them for just doing that and saying, oh, let's just have everyone play it as comfortably as possible. But it would have been better if they all had posh British accents as the evil.
Does it have to be received pronunciation or can it be Cockney?
No, if you're playing a villain, it has to be received, especially Nazis. It has to be
I would like to see a James Bond film where every character does a Cockney accent. James Bond, MI6, Q, the Queen, the King, all of them Cockney accents. Every single one. Would that be tolerable?
That'd be intolerable.
That'd be intolerable.
That would be utterly intolerable.
Hey,
the funny thing is, Bond a lot of times, Sean Connery's Bond didn't have received pronunciation. He had a bit of a Scottish brogue there.
Scottish accent.
Yes. Shocking. Positively
Shocking. Sci-Fi points out Kevin Costner as Robin Hood. Agreed. Agreed. Like, what are we doing? What are we talking about? Stop this madness. You're an actor, Kevin. Act. Okay? Like, put on some effort to have that accent. You can pull this off. Remember when Kevin Costner was in, what was that film about the Kennedys and the missile crisis? The name is escaping me at the moment. No. It wasn't called JFK.
Oh.
The missile crisis, the Cuban Missile Crisis. Yeah. He played like somebody in JFK's administration, very close to the Kennedy brothers, and he did a great job mimicking a Boston accent. Like, clearly he can put up some effort and create an accent. Yeah. Why didn't he do it for Robin Hood? I don't know, because we were too lazy to force him to act a little bit. I'm not sure.
I feel like that often is the case. I feel like
he also brings up Shia portrayal of Padre Pio. We have stricken that from the canon. It's not supposed to be mentioned publicly, Sci-Fi. It is persona non grata. It should never be mentioned ever again. God help.
Which is really a shame because I actually, looking at it, I think Shia could have done a good job portraying a good Padre Pio.
He could have.
Yep.
He's a method actor. Put yourself in the method, learn the accent, learn the behaviors, and do it well, and get rid of your curse words, because that was definitely not Padre Pio.
Again, I think that movie is really just a failure of, maybe not even a failure. It's just, it wasn't well written or directed or anything like that. And so it's a shame that we wasted, a potentially good portrayal on that.
Tradish Mom says, I hated everyone in Les Miserables. You didn't like gladiators singing in that film? It was great. What are you talking about?
Prisoner 24601. Your time is up and your parole's begun. You know what that means. My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius.
Oh, man.
Husband to a murdered wife. Father to a murdered son.
That'd be great. Can we make Gladiator the musical with Russell Crowe? That'd be so good. That'd be awesome.
That's great. You should do a parody.
Are you not entertained?
That'd be awesome.
You should do a parody.
Someone better than I have has probably done that.
You should do that. It'd be great. Russell Crowe, such a bitter, jaded guy. Everything that's made him rich and famous, he hates now. He loathes. He hates talking about it. Gladiator being amongst them. And I guess he doesn't like the negative feedback he received from his singing capabilities in Les Miserables, because I guess he's a musician. He travels.
He's in a band, I think, or was in a band. Yeah.
Oh man. Unlike some other Robin Hoods, I can speak with an English accent.
Yes.
Cary Elwes as Robin Hood.
That's from Men in Tights.
Yeah, Men in Tights. I'm toying with the idea of doing a live production of Christmas Carol next year with my kids, and my daughter's already assigned me the task of Ebenezer Scrooge, which I don't understand whatsoever.
I think you should be the ghost of Christmas Present, Joe.
The question is, what accent should I train for in preparation for that? Should I do the General Patent version of George C. Scott version of Christmas Carol and not bother, or do I go full on Cockney? You guys, let me know what you think I should do.
I think you should do the Somerset farmer accent and be the ghost of Christmas Present, Joe.
like the Hobbits or something like that.
Drink some cider. Yeah, exactly.
Drink some cider. All right, Scottish. I like that, Michael.
There you go.
I'll see you guys right back here tomorrow. Let's talk about Shakespeare then. God love you.